Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 471, Flaw. True heaven, old mother's head began to ache when Qin Mu stuffed the black tortoise bead to her again. If it was to search for someone, why was there even a need for such a treasure to be given to her? It was clearly another test. Is this brat a fox? He has already tested me 5-6 times and he's still testing. True heaven, old mother returned the black tortoise bead to Qin Mu with a warm gaze and smile. If it's just searching for someone, there's no need for such a treasure. Does cult master Qin have a painting of grandmaster? Qin Mu was like a blind man, disregarding her charming and flirtatious smile. He quickly drew a portrait of Pangong and handed it to her. True heaven, old mother was very patient. She executed spirit awakening spells to awaken white clouds, mountains, trees, and after asking all of them, she found Pangong-tso's whereabouts after a moment. The spells of True Heaven Palace aren't bad at all. If a constable got its hands on them, that person would definitely become a top-notch professional. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor pondered over it. Maybe we could have disciples of True Heaven Palace enter Eternal Peace to be constables. Imperial Preceptor's view is extraordinary, True Heaven, old mother said gently. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had no expression. These are just rough ideas. They aren't worth mentioning. On the way, True Heaven, old mother took care of Qin Mu and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's meals and accommodation. She poured tea for the two of them, washed their clothes, and cooked. A smile was always on her face, making her look very wise, kind, and considerate. However, Qin Mu and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor only took it as if it was natural, and Qin Mu even sent her to feed the dragon Qilin, that big fatty. True heaven, old mother never said a word of complaint, keeping her gentle and considerate persona. However, she was uncertain. Qin Mu looked like a natural romantic with his mouth smeared with honey, calling every woman he saw sister. However, he was a block of wood. No matter how she seduced him, he was ignorant and foolish, not reacting at all. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was even more remarkable. He seemed to have no emotions at all. He only knew what he had to do and was completely unmoved by her charms. As for the dragon Qilin, he was the most surprising. He always stared at his food basin and seriously counted every spirit pill in it. Even one less wasn't acceptable. When he wasn't eating, he would worry about his skin and hair not growing back or his scales filled with tiny black holes from the lightning not returning to normal. He would grumble he wasn't as handsome as before, then think of how to scam some more food from True Heaven, old mother. He almost blew her head with his endless chattering. I'll definitely kill them. True Heaven, old mother wanted to make a move, but when faced with Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, she had no chance. He never showed any flaw. Even when night came, he also didn't sleep and just sat with open eyes. After some time, True Heaven, old mother realized something even more terrifying, which was that when Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was eating, he was executing sword skills when he was picking food with his chopsticks. In the act of stretching his hand forward and pulling it back, that pervert actually executed several hundred types of sword skills. What was even more terrifying was that the action of taking a vegetable even involved the coordination of his muscles and tendons throughout his body, as well as the transformation of his vital qi. He was always at his best state, and it was so perfect that no flaw could be found. In comparison, Qin Mu was full of flaws, so she could kill him however miserably she wanted. It would require no effort on her part. However, if she didn't get rid of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor but went for Qin Mu first, the next one dead would be her. True Heaven, old mother didn't dare to make a move and only patiently waited for a chance. I don't believe he can always be this perfect. He will definitely reveal a flaw. In this world, even gods can't be without a flaw. On the journey, Qin Mu repeatedly consulted Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor regarding sword skills, and True Heaven, old mother listened attentively, hoping to find a flaw in his sword skills, but she soon discovered that she couldn't understand what they were talking about at all. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's attainments in the sword path improved at a godly speed, And Qin Mu's attainments in the sword skills were also extraordinary, so they were both specialists in that field. True Heaven Old Mother had extremely high attainments in the path of nature creation, but her comprehension of sword skills was far inferior. The two frequently exchanged blows in midair. Qin Mu would attack Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, who would always have a hand behind his back. With a sword in one hand, he easily blocked all of Qin Mu's attacks. They were extremely fierce and ever-changing, dazzling the eyes. In comparison, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword skills were extremely simple, and what he used were the most basic sword forms. Yet he could always break all the complicated sword skills. Qin Mu got tired from the fighting, so he stopped to rest. He buried himself in thinking about how to improve his sword skills. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor didn't say anything, letting him think silently. True Heaven Old Mother couldn't help becoming curious. Imperial Preceptor's sword skills are godly, so why aren't you giving him advice? I can't. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shook his head. He has already reached the extremes of sword skills, so for any new comprehensions he will have to rely on himself. True Heaven Old Mother jumped in shock. Even Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor couldn't give advice to Qin Mu anymore? Why didn't Imperial Preceptor seal his divine treasures to fight on the same realm as him? The eyes of True Heaven Old Mother asked then. I don't dare, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said honestly. His cultivation is too strong. On the same realm, I could only rely on the power of my sword path to fight him to the death. The density of his magic power could kill me in one move. True Heaven Old Mother looked at Qin Mu and thought to herself, to reach such heights at such a young age, this boy can't be left alive. Otherwise, who will be able to keep him in place? Just as she thought that, she heard a world-shattering sound come from Qin Mu's body, dispersing the white clouds in the surroundings. True Heaven Old Mother's heart trembled violently, and her expression turned to one of disbelief. It was the sound of a divine treasure's wall breaking, but the intensity was like when breaking through celestial being divine treasure. Bang, bang, bang. Light burst forth from Qin Mu's body and transformed into 7 stars that circled around him. It consisted of qi of pure yang that was like a blazing sun, qi of pure yin that was like a clear and bright moon. There was a huge Mars, Saturn emanating with earthy yellow color, Venus flashing with white rays, Mercury overflowing with water vapor, and Jupiter giving off the qi of green dragon. All of them were surrounded by electricity. Each of the 7 great stars had a god standing above them. They were of all kinds of strange shapes. One had a cow's head and human body, another had 3 legs and a bird's head, while the third had a tiger's head and a leopard's tail. The 7 great star sovereigns had all kinds of strange shapes. Qin Mu's body trembled violently, and a primordial spirit that was 15 yards tall appeared behind him. His hands were raised without holding anything, but the 7 stars floated above them. True Heaven Old Mother cried out in astonishment. Such a strong primordial spirit. He's on celestial being realm, so why did the vision of 7 stars appear? Did you hear how terrifying the sounds of his breakthrough were? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor let out a shaky breath while his eyes turned bleak. I always thought I was a straight line and didn't have any shortcomings. Only now do I know that I am not. He is that straight line while I'm a triangle. Overlord body, could it really be that strong? True Heaven Old Mother was bewildered. She was astonished by the alarming vision of 7 stars breakthrough, since the noise it produced shouldn't have been so shocking. However, what shocked her most was the Overlord body. She had never heard of such a constitution. Imperial Preceptor, what is the so-called Overlord body? True Heaven Old Mother asked sincerely to be enlightened. Overlord body comes from an ancient legend. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor spirit was aroused. This was told to me by a senior, so let me tell you in detail. Legend says that there can only be one Overlord body in the world. They chased after Pangongtso for some 5 days, which Qin Mu used to stabilize his 7 stars realm. His cultivation became denser and denser. At the same time, when he opened Spirit Embryo, 5 elements, 6 directions, and 7 stars divine treasure, the power of his cultivation was almost at the level of the dragon Qilin. The fatty was nervous and felt greatly threatened. Crap! If Cult Master's cultivation catches up to mine, I will be useless. Where will I be able to find another high-quality meal master like Cult Master Qin? True Heaven Old Mother let out a sigh of relief and smiled. We aren't far from Grandmaster now. Qin Mu looked up and around them. He was surprised to find the flaming desert in front of them. Pan Gong Tso must have run out of West Earth already. He's indeed Grandmaster, and no one can match his ability to escape. If not for Sister Siyu, he would have escaped again. The flames before them blazed high. The moment they got close to them, all kinds of strange markings appeared on Qin Mu's body, crawling all over him. The corners of True Heaven Old Mother's eyes twitched, and she asked in concern, "Cult Master Qin, these markings on your body, I guess it's a kind of curse." Qin Mu paid no heed to it. "The last time I came here, these markings appeared all over my body. They went all the way to the bottom of my heart, and no matter what, I couldn't get rid of them. Only when I walked out of the flaming desert did they automatically vanish. Even on the bottom of the feet?" True Heaven Old Mother's mind trembled violently, and she almost cried out in excitement. Royalty! He's royalty! She had killed countless nobles from the abandoned people of Great Ruins, but royals were only those with the bloodline of founding emperor. She had never killed a person like that before. He is not a noble of Great Ruins. He is royalty. True Heaven Old Mother was delighted, and all her sense of humiliation from the past few days vanished without a trace. She had traveled far and wide looking for one, but it had come to her himself. The higher-ups were most worried about the royals. If she could get rid of him, she'd be able to achieve meteoric success and leave the shithole that was this world to enjoy life in the upper bound. Her gaze flickered. Even though this brat is easy to deal with, he's the most important one. His life far surpasses the life of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor in terms of worth. But before taking care of him, I need to get rid of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. It's difficult to deal with him normally, but after entering the desert, I will have a way to do it. Grandmaster, I will have to trouble you. She cast a spell to gather the sand, awakening sand giants to ask them about Pangong Tso's location. The dragon Qilin increased his speed as he ran into the distance. By next morning, the dragon Qilin reached a well-preserved ruin in the desert. There was a huge sun ship as well as a sun that was half buried next to it. True Heaven Old Mother smiled. With this sun ship, Pangong Tso will find it hard to escape even if he wanted. Qin Mu's spirit rose and he smiled. Imperial Preceptor, Sister Siyu, stay here to watch the grounds. Don't let him run away again. I shall find Pangong Tso, that brat. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked at him. You don't need my help? No need. Qin Mu's speed increased, and he soon landed in a collapsed hall in the ruins. He laughed loudly. Pangong Tso, a friend from afar came to see you, so why aren't you coming out? Qin brat, you really can't stop haunting me. A figure soared into the sky from the sand. With a thump, it landed on the other end of the hall. It was a youth, and it was none other than Pangong Tso. He was full of metal and laughed loudly. You have come right on time. My cultivation has increased greatly these days, and I can finally achieve my long-cherished wish, to cut you into pieces and make you kneel before me. True Heaven Old Mother was staring at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's back all the while, and at that moment, she finally saw a flaw in him. Pub Future adds. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked at the ruin, seemingly worried about Qin Mu's safety. His concern messed him up, and this made him finally reveal a flaw. The flaw that True Heaven Old Mother had been looking for was right in front of her eyes. Iya! A weird screech came from True Heaven Old Mother's mouth. It was sharp, drawn out, and ear-piercing. Magic power burst out from her body, and all her muscles swelled up. In an instant, her skin burst apart. Her muscles expanded outwards furiously, and it showed up that Tian Siyu's corporeal body was not her original form at all. Once she released all of her magic power, her god's aura surged out and tore apart the body she had been inhabiting. At the same time, The flaming desert seemed to come alive, and sand flowed in from around several hundred miles. The sand under Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's feet formed into a swirling huge mouth that threatened to suck him in. The huge mouth was like an abyss with a terrifying suction force. Sand formed a line, then a sword which stabbed Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor who was being sucked into the ground. True Heaven Old Mother kept on screeching as her corporeal body swelled up to be 300 yards tall, as though she was an indomitable giant overflowing with God's aura. She had prepared for her sneak attack for a long time, and her actions were overflowing with aggressiveness. She looked a complete opposite of the warm and virtuous xianxia that took care of the group during the journey. Aggressiveness was usually an adjective used to describe men, but in West Earth, women were in charge of the household, so it was more suitable to describe them. True Heaven Old Mother raised her hand, and the desert around her churned and rose, forming two incomparably thick walls which slammed toward Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Die! Just as True Heaven Old Mother said that word, a sword light pierced the back of her head and left through the heart of her brows. True Heaven Old Mother was stunned, and the churning desert suddenly went still. The incomparably thick sand walls that were at least several hundred yards thick crumbled, turning back into flowing sand which was as astonishing as a flood. Under Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's feet, the swirling mouth also stopped turning and returned to being calm sand. The sand swords around him fell from the sky. Where is this brat from? This is the sacred wine for the high gods, so how can you touch it? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor turned his head back and looked at the awe-inspiring True Heaven Old Mother. His voice was gentle when he spoke. In the mural, the goddess that was kicked by Qin Mu had said this sentence which had a total of 20 words. Along the journey, Cult Master Qin had talked a lot with you, and you said each of those 20 words at least once. He's very clever. He knew if he asked you to say that sentence, you would definitely change your tone and style. However, if he broke up those 20 words and put them in numerous sentences, you wouldn't be on guard. So you guys hadn't believed me from the very beginning? True Heaven Old Mother croaked. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked at her with a strange gaze as he shook his head. Cult Master Qin was reckless to have stuffed black tortoise bead into your hands. I was also shocked. If you had attacked then and executed the power of black tortoise bead, I might not have been able to do anything to you. He had overestimated my abilities and I had no choice but to act natural. You thought that the two of us were testing you, but it was merely that bastard acting on his own. My heart was also palpitating then. You lost many chances. That bastard again. True Heaven Old Mother sighed, and the sword wound in the heart of her brows suddenly erupted with blood. She smiled and said, "However, if you think you can deal with me with just this, you are too simple-minded." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's face changed slightly. It wasn't blood that was flowing out of the heart of True Heaven Old Mother's brows but sand. True Heaven Old Mother smiled, and the wound became larger and larger as more and more sand flowed out. She chuckled. Don't you know, 10,000 Spirit Nature Technique was created by me. This desert is also created by me. Trying to kill me in the place I've created? Dream on. Her body collapsed, and her voice suddenly came from all directions. I had fought over a dozen sun ships and moon ships here, killing many sun and moon guardian. Do you think my reputation is undeserved? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor rushed into the sky and sprinted straight for the sun ship that lay prone on the desert. With his hand on the sword, his sword light was like perfect night. When one saw the shadow, they couldn't see the light. When one saw the light, they couldn't see the form. With shadow, there was no light. With light, there was no form. Before he could even reach the sun ship, it seemed to come alive, raising its legs to stand up. Chains rattled, and the huge black sun actually jolted upward. The sand that had covered it flew into the sky. The black sun rolled in the sky and created world-shaking rumbles as it compressed the space around it. Bolts of lightning struck everywhere in the desert. Sun ship rushed at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. As the huge thing sprinted through the desolate desert, it gave off an unbelievable and ridiculous feeling. This was the masterpiece of the Ministry of Heavenly Works during founding Emperor era. They created a weapon equal in power to heavenly gods through the power of man, allowing mortals to gain to stand on part with gods. In the center of Sun's ship, between the four pillars, a woman that was like a heavenly god slowly rose. Her four arms were outstretched toward the pillars. She laughed in delight. Yet they were only making weapons for me. They were completely wiped out, all dying under my hands. Whoosh! Flying snakes formed from sand rose from the desert. With their incomparably thick bodies, they tunneled here and there in the desert. They rushed at eternal peace, imperial preceptor. Can you feel it? Can you feel my magic power rising? True heaven old mother ordered Sun's ship to sprint forward frantically and smashed the black sun against eternal peace imperial preceptor while laughing. Let me show you what's true despair. Xianxia. Piercing screeches reverberated in the desert. What accompanied them was a huge moving ship that swung the black sun and incomparably thick snakes that surrounded an incomparably small human. The sight was astounding. True heaven old mother was extremely unreasonable, and her body was huge, much larger than Sun's ship. In comparison, eternal peace imperial preceptor was insignificant. True heaven old mother had chosen to use Sun's ship to overwhelm him, and every strike of hers was beyond imagination. Her attacks were ever-changing, and the sea of sand boiled. The entire desert was her body, her weapon. Eternal peace imperial preceptor continuously moved back, breaking the attacks of true heaven old mother repeatedly. As he retreated, however, the distance between him and Sun's ship was becoming smaller. True heaven old mother became nervous. Eternal peace imperial preceptor looked to be at a disadvantage, and Sun's ship, which was closing in on him, looked to have the advantage, but it wasn't really the case. She didn't have the upper hand and sensed great danger before her. If she and eternal peace imperial preceptor got closer and closer, what awaited her when they got a certain distance from each other would be that middle-aged man's fiercest attack. Closing in on him would definitely result in her demise. But it was impossible for her to stop halfway. Only by borrowing the energy of Sun's ship could she possess enough magic power to subdue him. But there was a huge disadvantage to it, which was that she needed to stand between the four pillars and hold on to them. It limited her own body's movements. If eternal peace imperial preceptor closed in on her, she could only offer her head. But if she didn't borrow the magic power of the ship and the four spirit beads, her battle power would be inferior to that of eternal peace imperial preceptor. This meant that she had to stay a distance away from eternal peace imperial preceptor and kill him before he could get close. The shorter the distance, the closer she got to her demise. True heaven old mother's magic power became even more violent, and her attacks became even more concentrated. She closed in step by step while eternal peace imperial preceptor was continuously forced backward, but not far enough. Every hair's breadth closer was a hair closer to death. True heaven old mother's screeches became louder and louder while sweat poured down her back in rivulets. Sun's ship and eternal peace imperial preceptor left the ruin, leaving Qin Mu and Pangong Tso standing on the opposite ends of a worn-down hall. True heaven old mother rose in revolt, and eternal peace imperial preceptor killing her in one sword had raised quite a commotion. This had scared Pangong Tso, nearly making him choose to run away once more. How powerful was eternal peace imperial preceptor? The battle at True Heaven Palace had made Pangong Tso completely forget about his plans to fight with the heroes of the current times. Now he just wanted to cultivate the divine bridge and kill the other by paying respect to him. However, when he saw True Heaven Old Mother escape when eternal peace imperial preceptor stabbed only a sand giant, he let out a sigh of relief and forgot his thoughts of escape. When he saw True Heaven Old Mother take hold of Sun's ship and suppress eternal peace imperial preceptor, he was delighted. Pangong Tso smiled and said leisurely, "Cult Master Qin's calculations are truly brilliant. You've imperial preceptor and True Heaven Old Mother to find me. I know what you were thinking. It's no less than killing two birds with one stone. Eternal peace imperial preceptor will land a sneak attack and assassinate True Heaven Old Mother, while you will take the chance while I was shocked to assassinate me. Truly a superb plan, but man's plans lose to those of gods. You didn't expect True Heaven Old Mother's abilities to be simply too strong. This was your first mistake. With his hands behind his back, he said leisurely, "Your second mistake was thinking too low of me. You treat me as a normal divine arts practitioner, and that's your biggest mistake. I've experienced over 10 reincarnations, and the speed of my cultivation is beyond your imagination. The speed at which I improve is also beyond your imagination." His aura burst forth, and violent vital chi distorted the air in the surroundings, forming tornadoes in the worn-down hall. They raised countless bricks and even swept up the thick pillars. The sight was astonishing. "What abilities do you have to face me?" Pan Gongtso asked in a shout. The power of his cultivation had improved tremendously compared to what it was when they had met at the desert. He could be said to have improved at godly speed. Pan Gongtso walked over in a stride, and apparitions of gods appeared behind his body, forming layers of paradise. His body was golden like that of a Buddha when he executed Rulai's Mahayana Sutra and reached Sarasvati heaven. Pan Gongtso lifted his hand and raised wind and thunder. The latter boomed as the palm crashed toward Qin Mu like a deluge of heavenly flowers. Qin Mu raised his hand. Boom! Half of the hall collapsed, and Pan Gongtso went down with the collapsed part of the hall, sprawling onto the ground. Qin Mu stomped on the ground. The rest of the hall collapsed, and a huge pit formed beneath him. Pan Gongtso had fallen deep into the sand. Qin Mu tilted his head and asked, "Grandmaster, what did you say?" Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 473, Life in the Mirror. Suddenly, rocks flew in all directions. Pan Gongtso rushed into the sky both embarrassed and angry and threw a huge cauldron above himself. It hung in midair with the mouth facing down, and instantly, sand, rocks, broken pillars, crumbling fences, and dilapidated walls were all sucked in by it. The huge cauldron was like a pot of boiling soup, which actually true fire. There might not be much of it. True fire was like an extremely terrifying boiling sea. Anything that entered the cauldron would be burned to ashes. This meant that it wasn't a weapon that Pan Gongtso could have created just then. The huge cauldron had to have been forged in on of his previous lives. It was extremely strong since it was a cult legacy treasure forged by an existence close to the god realm. However, due to his low cultivation, Pan Gongtso couldn't unleash its complete power. There were strong and weak spirit weapons, and they were classified according to realms. If one came in possession of a high-quality sword, it didn't mean that their power could multiple. It still depended on how much power could be brought out. For example, Qin Mu's carefree sword was a divine sword with astonishing power. But for the time being, Qin Mu couldn't unleash the power of the divine sword. He could only make use of its sharpness. Pan Gongtso was the same as well. With his current realm, he couldn't unleash the power of the spirit weapons he had crafted in his previous lifetimes. Even so, with the standard of being at the peak of 7 Stars realm, he could unleash 10% or so of the huge cauldron. Sand flew up in the ruin while more walls, pillars, and broken palace hall pieces got broken apart by the suction force and rose toward the cauldron. The entire ruin was continuously disintegrating and rising into the sky. Qin brat, now you know how powerful am I, right? Abilities don't rely just on cultivation. Pan Gongtso flipped over and landed on the huge cauldron with a sneer. So what if your cultivation is much denser than mine? My treasure is better than yours, so I can just smack you with it and have you die miserably. When he looked down, though, he was stunned. He saw Qin Mu standing under the cauldron and not moving. No matter how hard the suction force tried to pull him in, his body didn't lift up an inch. How is that possible? Pan Gongtso stared with his eyes wide open until he realized that Qin Mu was holding onto a metal ball that was the size of a tangerine. That circular ball suddenly moved and flowed like water or sand. Sword pellet. Pan Gongtso instantly understood why the huge cauldron couldn't suck in Qin Mu. The weight of his sword pellet had to be extremely great, weighing him down so much that even the cauldron he had forged in his previous life couldn't lift it up. Isn't his sword pellet only 2 feet long? If I can't capture you, I'll just have to kill you. Pan Gongtso suddenly dived down. When he smacked his palms against the huge cauldron, a clank rang out, and a sea of fire spewed out. Wherever it passed, everything was melted. Sand and stone were turned into boiling lava throughout the whole of the ruins. Qin Mu caught the sword pellet. Countless fine flying swords came flying out, and with Carefree Sword as the master, they merged together. With both hands on the sword, Qin Mu split apart the sea of fire that was pouncing at him. Wherever his sword passed, the fire would instantly be extinguished. The two sides of the desert were melting from the heat, but the place where the power of the sword had brushed by was still covered in red sand. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. True fire was incomparably fierce, and its power was extremely strong. He didn't know what kind of evil fire it was. Pan Gong Tso shouted loudly, and an abnormal change happened to his corporeal body. Wings grew out from his axilla, and his legs turned into talons. Flames poured down to protect his body from the cauldron above him. His wings were golden, and the feathers clanged when they collided against one another as his wings opened up. The gold feathers shot toward Qin Mu when his wings vibrated. With wind and thunder, sword-like feathers sliced through the air as though a storm was raging. Qin Mu's hands crisscrossed, and Carefree Sword instantly split into pieces, transforming into 8,000 flying swords that danced like a long river. The vast and mighty sword river rushed toward Pan Gong Tso. Pan Gong Tso was unstable in the air when he attacked. His sword feathers flew to welcome the sword river, and crisp sounds of collision rang out endlessly. After the clash, Pan Gong Tso cried out in alarm as he stood naked with broken sword feathers all over the floor. His feathers were all severed by Qin Mu, and only 2 naked wings flapped at his sides. The flames which had gone down to protect him from his huge cauldron were pretty famous and were called Blazing Divine Fire Shroud. Its defensive power was astonishing and could continuously shift the enemy's attacks toward the huge cauldron. Furthermore, the power of Blazing Divine Fire was also astonishing. Any weak spirit weapons would be turned into ashes. Yet Qin Mu just broke Blazing Divine Fire Shroud and even severed all of his feathers. This guy can even break my Blazing Divine Fire, so he's indeed slightly stronger than me. I'm not his match. Once Pan Gong Tso realized that, he didn't hesitate and leaped upwards. He picked the huge cauldron, pushing it to the ground, and chose escape through there. But before he could tunnel into the sand, Qin Mu caught the leg of the cauldron and lifted it up with a smile. "Grandmaster, where are you going?" Pan Gong Tso transformed into a black light to flee over the sand. Qin Mu threw away the huge cauldron, and his body also suddenly changed into that of a shadow to move through the ground. After a moment, sand filled the air as the two of them broke out 3,000 yards away. Pan Gong Tso took 2 frantic steps as feathers fell into place after growing out on his body once more. He then flapped his wing to soar into the sky. "Competing at speed with me?" Qin Mu executed heaven-pilfering divine legs, and he didn't need to use any spells or divine arts to step into the air. A human and bird chased after each other in midair. After a moment, the huge bird got beaten into a naked chicken and fell from the sky. Before Pan Gong Tso could land on the ground, an elephant's trumpet sounded out from his mouth. The muscles on his head and face grew crazily while his neck cracked and 2 more heads grew out, turning him into a 3-headed god statue that had elephants' heads. His corporeal body swelled up and reached the height of 20 yards. With boundless strength, he swung a punch straight at Qin Mu, who was chasing him. With his 3 heads, he shouted, "Qin Brat, die!" Boom! Their fists collided, and the force of corporeal body divine arts exploded. Blade-like whirlwind burst forth around them and swept up sand and stones into the air. The 3-headed elephant man coughed up blood, and his body flew backward. Qin Mu chased after, but before he could reach Pan Gong Tso, he saw him shaking to return to his original form. Pan Gong Tso leaped into the air then, and a lotus bloomed beneath him. It was about 3 yards big. Pan Gong Tso jumped into it, and Qin Mu saw that lotus close its petals before vanishing with the person inside. Qin Mu was astonished. Teleportation method? Doesn't look like it. Just as he thought that, a lotus suddenly popped out from the desert over a dozen miles away and bloomed quietly. Qin Mu hurried over with his vital qi bursting forth. With a flick, his sword pellet swooshed forward. As his fingers swirled rapidly, his sword pellet in front of him broke apart, and 8,000 flying swords transformed into a powerful current which rushed forward crazily, reaching the lotus a step earlier than him. Spiral sword form. The speed of the sword light was extremely fast, even faster than Qin Mu sprinting at his full speed. It reached the lotus in an instant. The lotus bloomed and Pan Gong Tso leaped out from the flower. He took out a piece of black cloth in a hurry. Then, after shaking it in the wind, he jumped into the cloth. Countless flying swords shredded the lotus into pieces and drowned out the black cloth. But even though it was shredded to pieces, Pan Gong Tso had vanished once more. Qin Mu landed on the ground and looked around. Above his head, 8,000 swords had lined up in a circle with their tips pointing outwards. No matter in which direction Pan Gong Tso came out, he would receive the fiercest attack. Yet the desert was calm. After Pan Gong Tso went into the cloth, he seemed to have vanished from the world. Far away, a sandstorm raged. Sun ship and countless sand dragons hid among flashes of lightning and booms of thunder in it. The black sun was flung with world-shaking power through the sandstorm from time to time. The energy waves from it even reached Qin Mu from time to time and formed tornadoes which swept red sand into the sky. It was hard to see far. In front of the sandstorm was Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's tiny figure. But Qin Mu paid no attention to the battle over there. He suddenly gave a heavy stomp on the ground, and the desert trembled. Small whirlwinds swept up the sand to form a sand giant, which was 4 to 5 feet tall. Qin Mu had also learned 10,000 spirit nature technique, but he wasn't as skilled as the disciples of True Heaven Palace. "Where is Pan Gong Tso hiding?" he asked. The delicate sand giant raised its hand to point. Qin Mu looked in that direction, but he didn't see anything. Cinnabar Heaven's eyes. Formation markings swirled in his eyes, and when he looked over again, he was slightly stunned. He could see an insignificant straight line in the air traveling with the wind at a speed that wasn't too fast. The surrounding wind and sand were very strong, but that fine line didn't bend at all. It was slightly strange. Qin Mu increased his speed and came to that fine line. He saw that it wasn't a line, but a mirror that was so thin that it had no thickness. It was about as high as a human. Pan Gong Tso had used phantom illusion technique of great educational heavenly devil scripture to transform into a black shadow to enter that mirror. Qin Mu was flabbergasted. He grabbed a flying sword to stab at the mirror while praising, "Grandmaster, it's no wonder you could survive until now." Pan Gong Tso saw him, and his expression changed tremendously. He threw out a rope from the mirror and climbed out with its help. Qin Mu's sword pierced through the mirror, shattering it into pieces. However, Pan Gong Tso had already climbed out with the rope and had vanished. What divine art is this? Qin Mu examined the surroundings with his cinnabar heaven's eyes, but couldn't find any traces of Pan Gong Tso. Suddenly, his heart shook, and he picked up a fragment of the mirror and moved it around. He then once again found Pan Gong Tso. He saw Pan Gong Tso had already climbed up to midair. The end of his rope had a hook which had been caught on a cloud. From the looks of it, Pan Gong Tso seemed to be planning on hiding in the cloud. Yet what was weird was that he and the rope seemed to be invisible and hidden in a strange space in the mirror which was somehow overlapping with the real world. The rope could hang in the space of the real world, but even Cinnabar Heaven's eyes couldn't see it. Grandmaster has truly become proficient in escaping for his life, Qin Mu exclaimed. He held the mirror in one hand while flicking his finger with another. Carefree sword flew out and rushed into the sky, slicing the invisible rope under the white cloud. Qin Mu grabbed another mirror and threw it out, right where Pan Gong Tso was falling. With a thump, he landed in it, and when he raised his head, he saw Qin Mu who was outside the mirror. "Grandmaster, can we talk now?" Qin Mu grabbed the mirror up with a smile. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 474, Evil Existence. Pan Gong Tso stood in the center of the mirror. He saw all the broken surfaces and the shattered pieces which were like broken up transparent land with an impassable distance between each part of it. His mirror was an unusual treasure which he had received from great ruins. The world inside the mirror could overlap with the real world, and no one would discover it. The only flaw was that he couldn't use any divine arts while inside. In the past, Pan Gong-tso had always used this treasure as a tool for escaping, so he had never expected that a day would come when he would end up trapped in the mirror. It was no longer possible for him to escape. Qin Mu had severed his rope, so the only way out was to jump out of the mirror, but if he attempted that, he would be pierced through the heart where he stood. Cult Master Qin was not here to kill me, but to have a talk? Pan Gong-tso gave up on the idea of escape and probed, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Qin Mu looked at Pan Gong-tso in the mirror and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "When did I have the chance? The moment you saw me, you wanted to act tough and even kill me, so I could only retaliate. Actually, when we met just now, didn't I say a friend from afar came to see you, and isn't that a joy? You should have known I had come to reminiscence about the past with you and not to kill you. So what was all this for?" Pan Gong-tso nearly vomited blood. The rascal had clearly said a friend from afar came to see you, so why aren't you coming out to die? When did he say isn't that a joy? However, now wasn't the time to argue about word choices. Since his life had landed in the brat's hands, it was best to follow his wishes. Cult Master Qin is noble, benevolent, and broad-minded, which I have always admired. This little brother was just joking with you earlier. I just wanted to see Cult Master's skill and power. You are indeed extraordinary. I'm completely won over. Pan Gong-tso wiped away the blood dripping from the corners of his mouth and sat down with a smile. For Cult Master to travel so far here, I wonder what you want to discuss? That god behind your back. Qin Mu raised the mirror with a face full of smiles. Imperial Preceptor and I would like to meet him and pay our respects to this sacred predecessor. I wonder if Grandmaster would give us the chance. Pan Gong-tso's face changed slightly. The god behind his back was none other than the god which appeared when he executed his shaman spell of paying respect to the soul. Qin Mu asking him the location of that god was definitely not to pay respect to him. He was preparing to gather power to get rid of that god. Cult Master Qin, Human Emperor Qin. How would I know such an existence? Pan Gong-tso immediately laughed. You know what my abilities are like. Such a measly existence like me, Cult Master can beat two with one hand, so how could I know any god? As for his location, that's something a weakling like me wouldn't be able to know. Cult Master, think please. Qin Mu held up the mirror and stabbed around in the sand with his sword. He said nonchalantly, Grandmaster says he doesn't know any gods, but that's obviously a lie. If you didn't know any gods, how could you invite people of high heavens to deal with me? How could you lure Su Xianxia out? If you didn't know any gods, how would you recognize true heaven old mother? Grandmaster, you and I are not kids, so let's not beat around the bush. You indeed don't have the right to know any gods, but the person behind you does, and you should be very close to him. The god apparition that appears behind your back when you pay your respects, that god should be your master or grandmaster, right? Pan Gong-tso looked at the sword with which he was stabbing the sand, and his face flickered between clear and dark. Suddenly, he stood up and paced to and fro in the mirror as he made a difficult decision. Everyone said he was the founder of Roland's Golden Palace, but they didn't know that there was someone else involved in it. Back then, when that god with whom Pan Gong-tso had a deep connection founded Roland's Golden Palace, it was by chance that it had landed in his hands. There were many disgraceful events in the past. He's my master. Pan Gong-tso stopped and raised his head to look at Qin Mu, who was outside the mirror. Your guess is right. The reason why I have connections with high heavens and was able to recognize true heaven old mother is indeed because of him. However, I would advise you not to provoke him. He's too evil. The corners of his eyes trembled violently as he said in a low voice, Cult Master should know that I'm considered evil, but compared to him, I pale into insignificance. I'm his disciple, but every time I execute the soul worship shaman spell, I need to borrow his power. You know that, right? Every time I use that shaman spell, I have to lose quite some lifespan. If he's treating even his disciple like this, what about others? This is why I wasn't willing to use this kind of shaman divine art. Qin Mu's expression couldn't help changing. Pan Gong-tso would actually say someone was evil? This was truly a fantasy story which no one could believe. In terms of evil in this world, Who could be above Pan Gong Tso, who had poisoned the entire prairie and killed countless of innocent herdsmen? I also don't know his true name. I only know what he goes by, Pan Gong Tso said. Other people call him Shaman God Kue. I think his surname should be Kue, but people of our lineage rarely reveal their true names and surnames, so his surname might not be real either. Shaman God Kue? Qin Mu was stunned. Kue was indeed a surname, but the Kue of Shaman God Kue could also not be a surname. Kue by itself could mean ear or ghost. Could it then be not a surname but the name of a race? If that was the case, Shaman God Kue should be a ghost. However, it's quite impossible for Cult Master to find him, Pan Gong Tso said. He came from another world and left early in my first lifetime. Qin Mu carefully examined Pan Gong Tso's face in the mirror, but the other didn't look like he was faking it. Cult Master Qin, there's no need to doubt me. There's no need for me to lie to you. I'm now in your hands and my life and death is within your grasp. I won't gain anything by lying to you. Qin Mu pondered it for a moment and smiled. Grandmaster, you are lying to me again. When did I lie to you? Pan Gong Tso asked helplessly. If he really left, why can you still execute the soul worship shaman spell? That apparition behind you, isn't it the apparition of his primordial spirit? Qin Mu smiled. Do you think I'll believe he has the ability to project his primordial spirit from another world? If he had this ability, the gods in the upper bound wouldn't need to go through so much by first sending their petrified corporeal bodies with orders for the gods of high heavens to activate the world-shattering divine artifacts. Pan Gong Tso's expression instantly changed. Qin Mu looked at the youth that was even younger than him and said leisurely, besides, he can also sense your summons and project his apparition over to help you kill others by paying respect to them. I don't think a god would be that free, and I don't think a soul worship shaman spell would be executed like this. What if one day he was in a bad mood and decided not to project his apparition? Wouldn't you be harmed by him then? Grandmaster, we are all smart people. So tell me a truth and I'll let you live. Pan Gong Tso's expression flickered. He suddenly laughed out loudly and clapped his hands. As expected of Cult Master Qin, the man who I view as my nemesis. It's not easy to trick you. That's right, he didn't leave. He planned to leave, but I schemed against him and severely injured him before taking away his primordial spirit. Qin Mu stared at him with his eyes wide open in astonishment. Pan Gong Tso's smile was full of pride. As the teacher, so the pupil. Whatever he taught me, I learned it all and even surpassed him. Yet that old thing never imparted the method of becoming a god to me. At that time, I was already old and about to die in a few years, but he never thought of our relationship as that of master and disciple. Humph. Since he wanted me to die, I chose for him to die first. So when he was finally ready to leave this world and the upper bound projected a divine ray to receive him, I made my move. Chill rose in Qin Mu's heart. Pan Gong Tso smiled and said, I used the divine art he taught me to disrupt the receiving divine ray, splitting it into two. Cult Master Qi, you are proficient in teleportation divine art. So when your teleportation divine art gets split into two, what will your end be like? Qin Mu's heart thunked against his ribcage. I will also split into two. Receiving divine ray is no different from teleportation divine art, with the only difference being in the separation of the corporeal body and the primordial spirit. Pan Gong Tso was immensely pleased with himself as he talked leisurely. I used shaman spells to sacrifice my disciple and split the receiving divine ray into two. The corporeal body and primordial spirit of my master, Shaman God Kue, instantly separated and fell from the receiving divine light. It was killing two birds with one stone. My disciple had long anticipated my death so he could take over my position, so I got rid of them both at the same time. Without a corporeal body, Shaman God Kue's primordial spirit was easy to control when I planted a soul bug in him. Qin Mu felt his hair stand on ends, and he sighed. Grandmaster, you said Shaman God Kue is evil, but in my eyes, he might not be as evil as you. Pan Gong Tso shook his head. You are overestimating me. I can't compare to him. He is the true evil. Even after having been trapped for so long, his corporeal body hasn't died yet, and his primordial spirit is also fine. It even nearly broke through my seal a few times after I made use of it to found soul worship shaman spell. Cult master didn't expect it, right? In my first lifetime, I was one of the top existences in this world, a strong practitioner that was close to God level. Maybe I had reincarnated too many times, and my wish to improve has been worn down, but my demeanor back then wasn't any inferior to that of Cult Master Qin. Qin Mu nodded. That is true. Grandmaster's abilities are extraordinary. Even though you learned the techniques of the other sects and sacred grounds, your shaman spells are your strongest skills. They were accumulated from your first lifetime, and other techniques that you learned in your successive lifetimes are just decorating what's already perfect. They are of little use to you. If you had focused on researching your shaman spells, your achievements today would not be what they are now. Pan Gong Tso's expression grew bleak and his voice dim. So what if I could cultivate my shaman spells to however strong they could get? I still couldn't become a god. After realizing this, I started to walk other paths, trying to find the path to become a god in other sacred grounds and sects. What a pity that they also didn't have it or even fully comprehended what I had learned in my lifetimes. In the end, it was Cult Master Qin, the man who I view as my greatest enemy, that spread the method of becoming a god to the public, giving me hope to finally reach that stage. You really make me sigh endlessly, not knowing what to say. He fell into a daze, then suddenly said, If I had met you in my first lifetime, we might not have been enemies. We might even have been friends. Qin Mu blushed and laughed. Grandmaster, don't joke around. I ain't evil at all. Where did you hide Shaman God Kuei's corporeal body, and where did you suppress his primordial spirit? If I tell you, will you not kill me and let me go that way? I can make an oath to Earth Count. Qin Mu said firmly. Pan Gong Tso shook his head. Cult Master, don't joke around. Qin Mu laughed loudly and waved his hand. If you don't want to make an oath to Earth Count, then let us make an oath to Shaman God Kuei's primordial spirit. If you go against the oath and give me a fake location, you will die suddenly when you meet him. It will be the same for me. If I don't let you go, I will die immediately when I meet him. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 475, Sinister Designs. Pan Gong Tso muttered to himself irresolutely. Qin Mu's suggestion was indeed sincere, but also very scheming. If Pan Gong Tso went against the oath, it would be equivalent to making his soul worship shaman spell useless. If he executed it, he would die immediately. When that art turned useless, his abilities would no longer be that terrifying. His divine art would also become extinct and no one would be able to use it again. Pan Gong Tso's threat level and existence would be enormously lowered. In fact, the reason why Qin Mu could be a match for Pan Gong Tso and was able to beat him up miserably was because the soul worship shaman spell didn't work on him. If he was faced with anyone else, even if they were a realm or two higher than him, they would still die under his art. There was no other end result. Only Qin Mu, whose name was Fake, could withstand Pan Gong Tso's strongest attack, forcing the other to fight him normally. All right, Pan Gong said without hesitation. Let's make an oath to Shaman God Kuei. He immediately executed soul worship shaman spell, and an altar appeared behind him. On it was Shaman God Kuei's apparition. The two immediately made an oath to Shaman God Kuei, and each analyzed the other's oath to see if there were any flaws. They instantly discovered that they were very clever and there weren't many flaws left, and the few that remained were traps. This old/little fox. The two of them cursed silently in their hearts. Pan Gong Tso let out a shaky breath and said, I hid Shaman God Kuei's corporeal body in Yang Mountain in the southernmost side of Great Ruins. His primordial spirit is suppressed at the northernmost side of Yin Mountain. If you go to those two places, you'll find him. He raised his head to look at Qin Mu outside the mirror. Cult Master Qin, you should fulfill your promise. You should have laid down some seal, right? Why don't you talk about it? Pan Gong Tso smiled at him in a way that wasn't really cheerful. Cult Master, the oath between us did not mention this. What's more, even if I say, would you believe me? Qin Mu yawned, still full of smiles. I don't dare to believe. But me saying that I won't kill you does not mean that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor won't kill you. Pan Gong Tso laughed loudly, and suddenly transformed into a black shadow that tunneled out from the mirror and returned to his natural form. He smiled and said, "Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is in battle with True Heaven Old Mother, and the two of them are currently at the most important stage. Their abilities are on par with each other and victory is hard to determine." He walked 2 rounds around Qin Mu, then suddenly attacked him while chuckling. "Cult Master Qin, the oath between us was that you let me go and don't kill me. But the oath didn't say I can't take this chance to attack you." Qin Mu's expression suddenly changed, and he quickly moved back. Pan Gong Tso attacked frantically while laughing loudly. His moves and forms were all executed to his heart's content, and the humiliation he'd felt before vanished. Qin Mu found it difficult to defend. The difference between them wasn't big, so if Pan Gong Tso continued attacking and he continued to defend, Pan Gong Tso would gain the upper hand and the advantage would keep increasing. In the end, Qin Mu would probably die under his hand. "Grandmaster." Qin Mu suddenly pulled out his sword and retaliated with a smile. "My oath said not to kill you, but it doesn't mean that I can't sever an arm or a few legs. Don't worry, little brother. I am proficient in the art of healing, so even if I cut off your head, I can ensure you will survive. At most I will connect your head to the body of a pig." Pan Gong Tso almost got his arm sliced off and immediately fell back, anger rushing to his heart. "You bastard! You bastard!" Qin Mu was also furious. "Didn't you also hide your plans, waiting to scheme against me?" Pan Gong Tso dodged here and there in a hurry, then patted his Taotai sack, and a sword case flew out. Flying swords soared into the sky and transformed into the 6th writing of Tao Sword. 7 unusual-looking golden lotuses, fondness of the generous Qing dynasty. This was the 7 stars realm's sword skill of Tao Sec's Tao Sword. The swords flew into 7 stars, and they transformed into lotuses which harbored the 5 elements and accepted the sun and the moon. This art had strangely great power. Qin Mu shouted and used the 6th writing of Tao Sword. The 2 sword skills collided, and Pan Gong Tso flew backward. He suddenly tunneled into the ground, and Qin Mu rushed forward while shouting loudly, "Fatty dragon, I will injure him and you kill him." After saying that, he tunneled into the ground as well. Far away, the dragon Qilin had always been watching without coming close. When he heard Qin Mu's order, he rushed over in a panic. Just as he came to where Qin Mu and Pan Gong Tso had vanished, the desert exploded 10 miles away as 2 figures rushed into the sky. Just as the dragon Qilin hurried over, the 2 of them flashed with teleportation runes and vanished. When the both of them reappeared, they were over 10 miles away once more. Sword lights clanked as they collided. "These 2 fellows who are both proficient in escaping for their lives, so how can I catch up to them?" the dragon Qilin grumbled. When he was about to chase after them again, Qin Mu and Pan Gong Tso's figures vanished once more. Swords filled the sky with sparks, causing blood lights to scatter. "Cult Master, stop running forward." The dragon Qilin looked forward, and his expression changed tremendously. He shouted out, "It's the battlefield of Imperial Preceptor and True Heaven Old Mother." Qin Mu chased after Pan Gong Tso, who only thought to escape for his life. With gritted teeth, he rushed into the sandstorm. Qin Mu also came where the wind blew violently, sweeping sand to form a terrifying sandstorm. Lightning flashed and thunder boomed in the sandstorm while sand, like countless small spirit weapons, almost broke his skin. It was very painful. "True Dragon Overlord Body," Qin Mu shouted out. He showed the result of merging 9 Dragon Monarch technique and Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. His vital chi was like a dragon which coiled around his body. His blood vessels flowed at great speed ceaselessly. His muscles were exploding like lightning and thunder when they moved. Sand in the wind hit his body and bounced against it. He didn't feel much pain anymore. 2 rays of light shot out from his eyes, and before the sand could come into eyes, it was vaporized by the divine light. Qin Mu looked around, but his gaze couldn't see far. However, Pan Gong Tso was not far away. Qin Mu immediately went forth to attack him. Below Pan Gong Tso's feet was a huge shield with tortoise markings. They glowed, and a magnificent tortoiseshell pattern appeared around his body, protecting him with layer after layer of defense. The number of treasures he possessed was unimaginable. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor invaded the Golden Palace, Pan Gong Tso had to have taken most of the spirit treasures he had gathered over the 10,000 years. The tortoiseshell pattern shield was obviously an extremely strong, unusual treasure. The two men found it hard to stabilize themselves in such a fierce sandstorm, and their bodies were swept around by the terrifying wind. Even their spirit weapons couldn't fly too far away or they would be swept away. Lightning struck in the desert and landed around the two of them. Suddenly, a terrifying pulse came sweeping over, and the two trembled violently before being flicked upward. That was the fluctuation of the space that was sometimes high and sometimes low. Their bodies were also sometimes pulled out and sometimes squeezed in, changing from 18 feet to only 5 feet in height. It was unbearable. Whoosh! A huge black sun rolled past by them, still surging with heat, igniting the sand and wind in the surroundings. The flames turned into fire tornado that was extremely quick and violent. Qin Mu and Pan Gong Tso couldn't stabilize their bodies and got swept into it. The incomparably thick fire tornado swirled rapidly and rushed them into the sky. Ding, ding, ding. The swords clashed over 100 times until a horizontal slash suddenly sliced apart the fire tornado. Qin Mu and Pan Gong Tso's bodies spun rapidly, but before they could stabilize themselves, a sand snake that was 300 yards thick gave off a deafening roar before pouncing at them with its mouth wide open. Qin Mu sprinted frantically while Pan Gong Tso was tumbling through the air on the other side. He barely avoided the incomparably thick sand snake and heard the rumblings from when the sand snake tunneled into the ground, causing the two of them to puke blood from the vibration. True Heaven Old Mother and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's battle was simply too fierce. They couldn't endure even the aftershock raised by the two gods and could die at any time in the sandstorm. Pan Gong Tso rushed out of the sandstorm after avoiding the sand snake. However, at that moment, deafening footstep rang out. Qin Mu and Pan Gong Tso fell in a daze. A huge land was moving in the desert. Wherever it passed, space would warp and create ripples from the vibrations. Space couldn't normally be seen, but once it was crushed by sunship, one could actually see its ripples. Run! Pan Gong Tso screamed, but his voice was drowned out in the sandstorm. Qin Mu tried to sprint away, but even when he executed Cripple's heaven-pilfering divine legs, he couldn't run fast. The wind was simply too strong. Incomparably strong God's aura rushed over, and the two of them puked blood from the impact. Even Qin Mu's true dragon overlord body and Pan Gong Tso's tortoise shield couldn't withstand it. One has to know that both their cultivations were definitely at the peak of 7 Stars realm. They were only one step away from celestial being realm, but the god's aura from the sandstorm was too strong. Bang bang. Qin Mu stuck to a leg of sunship and couldn't move away. His face creased numerous times from the wind, and the ripple in space suddenly stretched his body to be over 20 feet long. Qin Mu felt his brain becoming fine and sharp. Even his sight became strange. Beside him was Pan Gong Tso, who was also pulled into a long noodle as he held onto the leg of sunship with all his might. After that wave, the power of the wind decreased, and their bodies bounced back. Qin Mu raised the sword with both his hands to swirl rapidly, slashing along the legs of sunship toward his opponent. Pan Gong Tso stepped on the tortoiseshell and raised his sword to defend. He then grunted, and a deep cut was opened in his leg. Boom! Ripples came from sunship again, and this ripple was bursting outwards, bouncing the two of them out and squeezing the two of them into a round ball. At that moment, Qin Mu saw a sword light slicing apart the sandstorm. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked onto sunship among the terrifying ripples, and his sword light split the head of True Heaven Old Mother, who was between the 4 pillars. However, True Heaven Old Mother revealed a cruel smile at that moment, and the huge black sun came toward the back of Imperial Preceptor. The black sun crushed nearly everything on sunship and rolled off its end, flipping sunship over to tumble a couple times before stopping. Qin Mu was lifted off by the terrifying storm, which was still surging frantically, sweeping up and swallowing more of the flaming desert. Even the dragon Qilin was swept up as he struggled helplessly. Soon, though, He and Qin Mu resigned themselves to fate and let the storm blow them away. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 476, Multicolored Sunlight in the Red Sea. After the storm, Qin Mu crawled out from the tall sand dune and looked around. In his eyes was a silent and desolate desert. There were only sand dunes in the shape of scales left after the hurricane had swept past. The huge sun ship was in pieces, completely broken down. It was clear that the power of true Heaven Old Mother's last strike had been incredibly strong. She had the mentality of bringing Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor down with her when she had executed it. This had resulted in the sun ship being shattered as well. The flames in the desert had vanished. Even though the sand was still red, the flames that burned the abandoned people of Great Ruins were no longer present. Qin Mu looked into the distance, but didn't see them anywhere. The flaming desert had been extinguished. He couldn't help being stunned and hurriedly raised his hand. The flame markings on his skin had also vanished. He took out a few mirrors and raised them up and down, but he still didn't see any flame markings. True Heaven Old Mother is dead. Qin Mu's heart pounded furiously. True Heaven Old Mother had laid down flames that were specially targeted at the abandoned people of Great Ruins. Flame markings would appear on the faces of those who stepped into the desert, and the purer their bloodline, the more flame markings would appear. For example, Qin Mu's flame markings had crawled all over his body. But true Heaven Old Mother had died, so the flames in the desert had vanished as well. The flame markings on the abandoned people also went away. PFFF. PFFF. One of the sand dunes far away split open, and the dragon Qilin crawled out from inside it while spitting out sand. Qin Mu greeted him from far away and hobbled over. His injuries were very severe, but they weren't from fighting against Pangongtso. It was the terrifying impact from the last strike of true Heaven Old Mother that had heavily injured him. The dragon Qilin rushed in front of Qin Mu and lowered his tail. Qin Mu stepped on its tip, and the dragon Qilin raised it for him to slide down to his back. The dragon Qilin sprinted to the side of Sun Ship. Qin Mu sat down and shouted loudly, "Imperial Preceptor, are you still alive? I'm over here." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's voice came from nearby, and Qin Mu looked toward its source. He saw Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor under the shade of a huge rock. Qin Mu slid down from the back of the dragon Qilin with a smile. "You're injured again? Not too serious. The damage is much lighter than the last time." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor closed his eyes as though he was nodding off to sleep. He then opened one eye to glance backward while saying weakly, "True Heaven Old Mother was indeed strong. By borrowing the power of Sun Ship, she surpassed the gods of high heavens." Qin Mu looked in the same direction as him, but he didn't see anything. Bewildered, he first focused on treating his own injuries. Afterward, he wanted to move Imperial Preceptor, but he realized he couldn't do so. "Cult Master, you can't lift a god," Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said with a smile that was not a smile. Qin Mu understood what he meant and came over to treat him. "Imperial Preceptor still plans to go to high heavens?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shook his head. "True Heaven Old Mother had the advantage of land when we exchanged blows just now, and I almost lost. If I go to high heavens, there will still be gods there, and it's their territory. It would be even more dangerous than what I faced now. I need to wait a moment for the Emperor and other cult master level existences to become gods as well." There were numerous strong practitioners on Divine Bridge Realm in Eternal Peace Empire who had been stuck on that realm for numerous years. The spread of the space algebra model of repairing the Divine Bridge by Qin Mu had given them hope to become gods. "You let Grandmaster go?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor asked. Qin Mu spoke seriously while checking on his injury. "I had a deal with him to not take his life, but it's very hard for me to hold him back without harming his life. Grandmaster's ability to escape is unmatched in this world. I have never seen such a slippery person before. However, I was lucky enough to get half of his leg. Him going free will only cause more trouble in the future. Even I can't defend against his soul worship shaman spell. Very few people know my real name, but if he went to River Tomb to check, he could find it. The Emperor's name can also be discovered, Eternal peace, Imperial Preceptor said solemnly. Qin Mu took out a lot of silver needles and turned him into a huge porcupine. Stabbing the last needle at the heart of his brows, he smiled and said, "To me, Grandmaster is no longer a worry. The god behind him is called Shaman God Kue. He was lost to Grandmaster, who tore his spirit and body apart. Grandmaster hid his corporeal body in Great Ruins Yang Mountain and his primordial spirit in Yin Mountain. As long as we wipe out the primordial spirit of Shaman God Kue, we will be able to break Grandmaster's soul worship shaman spell." Eternal peace, Imperial Preceptor took a glance at him with an indifferent expression. What if Grandmaster is a step ahead of you and relocates the primordial spirit of Shaman God Kue? Qin Mu was stunned, then gave a slap to Imperial Preceptor's thigh which made him tear up from pain. Qin Mu hurriedly pulled back his hand and quickly refined a couple furnaces of spirit pills. Grandmaster's medical expertise is great. Only slightly inferior to mine. He won't die even if he lost half a leg. Stay here. I'll make a trip to Yin Mountain. Remember to eat your medicine on time. Eternal peace, Imperial Preceptor took out the black tortoise bead and threw it to him. Take it in case of anything. Qin Mu left a few bags of water and food before jumping onto the dragon Qian's back and leaving quickly. Eternal peace, Imperial Preceptor leaned against the huge rock and thought to get to his feet, but he collapsed right after. Panting heavily, he smiled bitterly. I'm injured to such a state again. Luckily, when Cult Master, this little scoundrel, stuffed the black tortoise bead into True Heaven Old Mother's hand, she didn't make a move. Otherwise, I would have really been played to death by him. He couldn't help feeling post-traumatic stress. Qin Mu had pushed the black tortoise bead and the green dragon bead into the hands of True Heaven Old Mother time and again to test her. However, he didn't consider that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor might not be as strong as he expected. That fellow was full of confidence in Imperial Preceptor, more than even Imperial Preceptor had in himself. When walking beside Qin Mu, the danger only kept on multiplying. Luckily, the brat is gone. Yin Mountain is dangerous, but being around him is even more dangerous. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor laid down to recuperate. At that moment, behind the huge rock he was lying on, sand was swirling silently and slowly gathering to form a sand giant. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor seemed to not notice anything, and snores came from his throat. However, his eyes slowly opened. He secretly raised his hand and pulled out the silver needle Qin Mu had stabbed in the heart of his brows. It wasn't a silver needle but a sword, carefree sword. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor held it with narrowed eyes, then suddenly stabbed into the rock behind him. The sand giant was smiling at that moment, ready to pounce. Carefree sword pierced its heart. With a bang, 8,000 sword lights shot out in all directions, bursting out from the sand giant's body. Carefree sword trembled, and the 8,000 swords flew back while dripping with divine blood from their tips. They combined to form a sword pellet the size of a tangerine. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor leaned on the rock while the sword pellet went around the rock to come back to him. Thanks. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor smiled and gave the pellet a flick. It whizzed away and vanished into the distance. Behind the huge rock, the sand giant was slowly crumbling while divine blood poured out from it. More and more blood dyed the ground. The dragon Qian was sprinting to the east when Qin Mu raised his hand and beckoned with it. The sword pellet whizzed over and landed in his hand. The dragon Qian suddenly sunk down and tumbled forward. Qin Mu hid the sword pellet in the Taotai sack and smiled. True Heaven Old Mother is finally dead. Shocked, the dragon Qian cried out. True Heaven Old Mother was still alive? Didn't the flame markings on your body vanish and the flames of the desert go out? How could she still have been alive? She's cunning, and she did it for us to think that she's already dead. So Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also acted as though he thought she was dead. However, he threw me a glance in warning, so when I was treating him, I transformed Carefree's sword into a needle and stabbed it into the heart of his brows. Qin Mu smiled. The reason Imperial Preceptor handed me Black Tortoise Bead was also because he was afraid it would land in the hands of True Heaven Old Mother, making her even harder to deal with. Now she is really dead. If you don't believe me, look back. The dragon Qilin hurriedly looked back and saw a scarlet red sea slowly spreading out at a great speed. It was formed from divine blood and was swallowing the desert, rushing toward them. The sight was extremely frightening. The dragon Qilin sprinted away. After over 100 miles, the Red Sea no longer expanded. The dragon Qilin asked, "True heaven old mother bled so much?" Her divine blood transformed back to mortal blood, so there naturally was more of it. Qin Mu also looked back and saw multicolored sunlight above the Red Sea. On the seashore, dense vegetation grew frantically. After all, even a desolate place like the desert had numerous tenacious life forms. It's the same for humans as well. No matter how harsh the environment is, they will always find a way to survive. He opened Cinnabar Heaven's eyes to look into the distance. The sun ship that was broken into pieces had become an island in the center of the Red Sea. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had climbed onto it and wasn't drenched in blood. Remember to take your medicine on time. Qin Mu waved his hand and had the dragon Qilin quickly leave. Pan Gong Tso stopped his bleeding while sitting on a bunch of cattail leaves that were rushing with a gale. When he came to Great Ruins, it was already 3 days later, and the sky was turning dark. During the 3 days, he had treated his injuries. However, his right lower leg had been severed by Qin Mu, so his movement was impaired. Pan Gong Tso looked around, and his eyes lit up. He followed a herd of strange beasts and arrived at a ruin before darkness descended. Kai! Pan Gong Tso raised his hand to sever a buck's leg, and the strange beast growled, making threatening sounds. Pan Gong Tso opened his Taotai sack, and a swarm of soul bugs flew out. He sneered. "You guys also dare to bully me? A bunch of beasts. I can't do anything to the Qin brat, but killing all of you is easy." The other strange beasts looked at the soul bugs flying around and didn't dare to go forward recklessly. Grandmaster is truly assertive. Suddenly, a voice came from the ruin, speaking in a leisurely manner. For Grandmaster of Roland's Golden Palace to end up in a state of having to bully strange beasts, how laughable. Who is it? Pan Gong Tso immediately connected the buck's leg to his broken leg, not caring about doing it properly. He quickly stood up as a chest flew out from the depths of the ruin. Bang! The chest opened up, and 2 legs ran out from inside it. They were followed by 2 arms and a torso which slowly pieced together into a headless body. It went through the chest and took out a head to place on its neck. "Grandmaster, don't you recognize your old friend?" The strange body turned around, and it was a youth with red lips and white teeth. There was a bewitching smile on his face. Pan Gong Tso's face turned ashen. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 477 All Realms as One. Xing. Pan Gong Tso shivered and forced out a smile. "Old brother Xing, long time no see. We are all old friends, and the last time you asked me about Qin Mu's location, I even drew a painting for you. It was quite good, right? With our friendship, I believe you don't have any ill intentions toward me, right?" Xing sat down on his chest and sneered. "Qin Mu. Qin Mu again." He clenched his teeth, and murderous intent swept through the ruins, scaring the strange beasts into cowering on the ground. Pan Gong Tso's heart fluttered violently, and he asked in a trembling voice, "Brother Xing also suffered in his hands?" "Suffered?" Xing laughed. "How would I suffer at his hands? He has too many elders in his family. I miscalculated, and it resulted in an encirclement. I had no choice but to retreat and avoid the cutting edge." Pan Gong Tso rolled his eyes. It was obvious that Xing had suffered a loss. He had been chased away by Qin Mu's elders and had no choice but to escape and hide at a place near West Earth, not daring to show himself. He didn't know that Xing wasn't as weak as he imagined. The other was incomparably strong and had severely injured blind, deaf, cripple, Granny C, Emperor Yanfeng, and the rest of the great experts. Over 10 people of cult master level had been heavily injured in just one move from him. If it wasn't for Qin Mu poisoning him, they would have all been wiped out. Even when he was poisoned and severely injured, he was still able to avoid butcher, escaping all the way from eternal peace to where they were now. His toughness was even above the gods of high heavens. As for the Grandmaster, I don't have any interest. Xianxia took a glance at him and shook his head. When you cultivate your corporeal body or primordial spirit to godhood, I might be a little interested in you. You and I are friends after all, and you have also given your 2 arms to me as a present. I won't lay my hands on you. What happened to your leg? This sword wound. He suddenly caught Pan Gongtso by the leg and gave a gently twist to it. The buck's leg that was just attached was instantly removed. Pan Gongtso endured the pain, not daring to say anything. Xianxia looked carefully. A sword wound left behind by the sword skill of that Qin. You must have met great divine physician Qin Mu and got your leg cut off by him. Beads of sweat rolled down Pan Gongtso's forehead, and he croaked out with a forced smile. I was chased by Qin Mu and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. When I was careless, the Qin brat managed to sever half of my leg. Old brother Xianxia, if you want to take revenge on the Qin brat, I got a good chance for you. I need your help to take revenge on him? Xianxia shook his head. If I wanted to kill him, there's no one in the world who could protect him. Where is he? I've heard Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is also an expert, so I could take some things from his body on the way. Pan Gongtso smiled. I don't know where the Qin brat is now, but I know where he's going. He plans to go to Qin Mountain to find my master's primordial spirit. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor follows him closely, so he will definitely come as well. Xianxia was instantly interested. The primordial spirit of your master? You once paid your respect to me and almost took my life. The apparition of that god is the primordial spirit of your master. Pan Gongtso's heart tightened and he immediately said, I was forced to do so. It was as the saying goes, if you don't fight, you won't make friends. If I hadn't fought with old brother Xianxia once, how would I have had the chance to know brother? Xianxia smiled. The primordial spirit of your master. I would like to collect it very much. Pan Gongtso was thinking of baiting him into danger and making him fight with Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor so both of them would suffer. If old brother Xianxia took a liking to it, feel free to take it. It's just that, old brother, this leg of mine, could you? Xianxia jumped into his chest. Great divine physician Qin snatched quite a bit of my collection, so not much is left. Just use the buck's leg for now. When I kill divine physician Qin and Imperial Preceptor, it won't be a problem to give you a divine leg. Pan Gongtso could only pick up the buck's leg and reattach it again. This time, he did it more carefully to prevent any hidden ailments. Xianxia is petty and might not be willing to give me a divine leg when the time comes. However, when he and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor fight each other, his collection will be mine. The dragon Qilin carried Qin Mu back to Great Ruins at a speed that was as fast as lightning. After 2 days, they saw the strange beasts in the surroundings gradually lessen, but there were more villages and monks walking to and fro. When they saw him riding the dragon Qilin overhead, they all stopped and looked at him with strange gazes. Cult Master, why are they looking at us? The dragon Qilin was puzzled. Formation markings swirled in Qin Mu's eyes when he looked down at the monks. How were they monks? In his eyes, they were clearly fiendish great demons. He looked at the villagers in the streets. They had a thriving population and were also great demons with all kinds of different faces. Suddenly, Qin Mu heard a bell ringing from far away. Sounded very melodious. Qin Mu's heart stirred. We are near Little Thunderclap Monastery. He jumped off the back of the dragon Qilin and began to walk on his feet. The monks which had been staring at them then turned their heads away. The dragon Qilin was bewildered. Cult Master, why aren't they staring anymore? All lives are equal, Qin Mu said in a low voice. The dragon Qilin was still puzzled. I carry Cult Master to work for my meals. If all lives are equal, who is going to refine spirit pills for me to eat? Qin Mu burst out laughing. After a moment, they passed by Little Thunderclap Monastery, and Qin Mu exclaimed endlessly. Little Thunderclap Monastery was built by Little Rulai, who was a demon monk from Great Thunderclap Monastery, a disciple of Rulai of that time. His cultivation realm was extremely high and his abilities were remarkable. But he didn't become Great Thunderclap Monastery's Rulai, and he was indignant, so he fought his way out to found Little Thunderclap Monastery in great ruins. The lavishness of Little Thunderclap Monastery was actually no inferior to that of Great Thunderclap Monastery. As a matter of fact, it might even surpass it. There were strange peaks and lofty mountain ranges with precipitous cliffs. On the mountain peaks, stone statues pasted with gold stood upright. Temples and monasteries of all sizes were flourishing with incense, and there were practitioners of Buddhism coming forward to pay their respects to Buddha all over the place. The smoke of the incenses lingered among the mountains, filling the sky as incense clouds. It was Qin Mu's first time there, and he knew he had once pushed down Little Rulai's Buddha statue, so he planned to take a detour. But at that moment, he heard a familiar voice which cried out in astonishment. "Why is Cult Master Qin here?" Qin Mu looked toward the speaker and couldn't help being stunned. He smiled. "Brother Su is also at this place? What a coincidence!" Su Xianxia and Jing Yan each carried a backpack and were following behind a big and fat monk. Qin Mu was astonished. The fat monk's physique was extraordinarily tall and sturdy. He was none other than Little Thunderclap Monastery's Little Rulai. He had once seen Little Rulai in a village of great ruins when Little Rulai invited Taoist Ling Jing to a battle. They fought fiercely in the night, and Qin Mu had been right beside them. Little Rulai had a plump head and big ears. His appearance was out of the ordinary, and he was very courteous to Su Xianxia. He was invited both of them to be guests, and when he looked at Qin Mu, the latter only felt a snow-white light which was Little Rulai's gaze. "So it's Cult Master Qin." Little Rulai's voice boomed like thunder. "You are a guest from afar, so even though Cult Master Qin and I have grudges, I have to be hospitable to you. Cult Master, please come up the mountain to chat." Qin Mu hesitated for a moment. "Senior brother is too courteous. I have something urgent to do, so I need to make a trip to Yin Mountain." Jing Yan smiled. "Young Master Qin is going to Yin Mountain? We are just coming back from it." Young Master and eminent monk met in Yin Mountain and reaped big benefits. Qin Mu was astonished and looked at Su Xianxia. The youth nodded and said, "Yanzi and I roamed around until we came to Yin Mountain. We saw eminent monk there subduing the primordial spirit of a devil god. He was stuck in a stalemate, so we went forward to assist and subdued it by a fluke." "Why is Cult Master Qin going to Yin Mountain?" Qin Mu's mind trembled violently, and he cried out, "You guys subdued a primordial spirit of a devil god in Yin Mountain? Did this primordial spirit call itself Shaman God Kue?" Little Rulai was astonished. Cult Master Qin's divine strategy and wonderful planning have already reached such an extent? Old monk encountered that devil trapped on Yin Mountain. When I saw countless damned souls lingering around him, I knew it was my task and my heart of enlightenment was moved. Thus I made my move. But little did I know that even though that devil was suppressed by someone, he still had remarkable abilities, nearly absorbing me a few times. Luckily young Master Su came by and used the spell of high heavens to assist me. Qin Mu suddenly laughed out loudly. "In that case, I have no need to go to Yin Mountain. Truth be told, I was also planning to subdue the primordial spirit of that devil god. Since Rulai invited me, I shall go and be a guest." "Sorry to disturb." Little Rulai looked at him and asked, "Everyone calls me Little Rulai, so why didn't Cult Master Qin add Little?" Qin Mu smiled. "Rulai is a realm. Once you reach it, there's no big or little." This eminent monk was pleased. Cult Master has the heart of Buddha. If you convert to Buddhism, you will definitely become Rulai in the future. Please. Qin Mu followed them up the mountain. Looking at Su Xianxia and Jing Yan, he smiled and said, "Husband and wife sure are living the life, roaming the world for scenic tours. Not like me, living a life of hard work, running here and there. Have you too cultivated primordial spirit guide?" Jing Yan's face became slightly red, and she gently nodded. Qin Mu laughed loudly. "Primordial Spirit Guide was founded by Cult Master, right? It has indeed allowed me to advance tremendously. From Primordial Spirit Guide, I founded a complete 6 directions realms technique and advanced another step further. Now, I have already paved a passage between 6 directions and 7 stars. These 2 great divine treasures, turning them into one divine treasure, Su Xianxia said leisurely. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently, and he looked at Su Xianxia. After a moment, he let out a shaky breath and praised him. As expected of the fake overlord body, you are just a little inferior to me. Su Xianxia smiled. The change in the great Tao of heaven and earth from merging 7 stars and 6 directions into one is no inferior to that of primordial spirit guide, right? Cult master, your overlord body might just be the beta. Qin Mu smiled lightly and said leisurely, even though I didn't manage to merge the 2 great divine treasures, I created the 18th sword form during this time. Su Xianxia's pupils contracted. Little Rulai looked at the 2 men, and his mind trembled. Not long ago, old monk felt 2 changes in the great Tao of heaven and earth. Could it be due to 2 benefactors? In Yin Mountain, a sword light flew over, and Pangong Tso dropped to the ground. He grabbed his left leg and rolled around in pain while sweat rolled down his brow like rain. This is the price for lying to me, Xing'an said indifferently. Your master's primordial spirit is not here. Grandmaster, get another buck's leg for your other leg and walk like that from now onwards. Pangong Tso hissed through his teeth while enduring the pain. My master's primordial spirit has been seized by others. However, it is still around. As long as I execute my shaman spells, I will be able to sense its direction. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 478, Shaman God Kuei's Soul Worship. Qin Mu examined his surroundings in Little Thunderclap Monastery and discovered that most of the decorations were similar to those of Great Thunderclap Monastery. After all, Little Thunderclap Monastery had only developed for a few hundred years. Without a foundation, they could only imitate. However, there was a great number of demon monks, and they were no inferior to monks from Great Thunderclap Monastery. Little Thunderclap Monastery could be said to be the only sacred ground in Great Ruins. Without any competitors and an extremely high number of strange beasts, it was abnormally flourishing. There were numerous demon monks walking to and fro. They were all immaculately dressed and polite. Qin Mu even saw a flood dragon coiled in a temple, passing on scriptures and preaching to demon beasts that had not yet transformed. In other temples, there were eminent monks of the demon race also preaching to numerous demon monks, teaching them divine arts and even imparting methods of forging treasures. This place looks like a civilization of the demon race. Qin Mu admired the place, not taking Little Rulai's behavior into consideration. To be able to develop Little Thunderclap Monastery to such an extent all on his own was already something to respect. Little Rulai and Old Rulai were junior and senior brothers. Their age was about the same, but Old Rulai's lifespan had come to an end and he had died in battle on Godbroken Mountain Range. However, Little Rulai was a great demon who had achieved Tao, so his lifespan was very long. With him around, Little Thunderclap Monastery was becoming more and more flourishing. Suddenly, 2 great demons leaped over as though they were flying and fought each other. They sometimes soared into the clouds and sometimes dove into the valley. Their attacks were extremely fast and their moves were fierce. Both of them were extremely powerful. The abilities of the 2 senior brothers aren't weak, Su Xianxia said in astonishment when he raised his head and took a look. Big fella, Qin Mu shouted out in delight. One of the great demons was a muscular demon monk with only some black hair on his face and hands. He wielded a monk staff in his fight. When he heard Qin Mu, he immediately knocked his opponent away and leaped over. Landing on the ground with a crash, he said in astonishment, Young Un, bald, where? The words were directed at Little Rulai, who couldn't help becoming furious and giving him a slap on the head. Who calls their own master bald donkey? I'm not a donkey that achieved Tao. Devil Ape Zhang Kong immediately covered his head and muttered, Little, where? Little Rulai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I met him at the bottom of the mountain, so I invited him to come over. The devil ape grinned and wanted to hug Qin Mu, but he realized that the youth was too short. Qin Mu had grown quite a bit and was at the same height as Butcher, only slightly shorter than Apothecary, but the devil ape's body was extremely majestic. In the past, when he was still underage, he had already almost towered over the trees. Now that he had grown, if he revealed his true body, he wouldn't be much smaller than the dragon Qilin. Even when he transformed into a human, his height was close to 20 feet. The great demon with which he'd been fighting pounced over, wanting to continue fighting. He cried out, "Senior brother Zhang Kong, let's fight." The devil ape was furious and stretched his hand out to grab the neck of that demon monk. The man's temper instantly cooled, and his 4 limbs hung down. The tail behind his butt also dropped and wagged as though he was currying favor. The devil ape placed him down and put him in front of Qin Mu while saying loudly, "Meet, guest." Qin Mu looked at the bald demon monk who was shivering on the ground. He hurriedly shook his head. "Since he's your junior brother, I can't eat him even if you offer him to me." The devil ape scratched his head and looked at little Rulai who was beside him. The fats on little Rulai's face twitched as he held back his anger. "Disciple, are you going to use even your master as dinner now that your good friend is here?" The devil ape hurriedly shook his head. Qin Mu smiled and said, "We have not met in a long time, but you don't need to think about treating me to meat. When you enter a village, follow the local customs. I'll just be a vegetarian. I also can't eat someone as strong as Rulai." The devil ape was very happy. Vegetarian, strong. Why does senior brother Zhang Kong simplify his words when he talks? Jing Yan asked curiously. Zhang Kong has great Buddha nature and cherishes his words like gold. Each one holds deep meaning. When I saw this quality in him, I took him in as my disciple, little Rulai said. Jing Yan was puzzled. She had seen him cherish his words like gold, but she couldn't see any Buddha nature. What kind of Buddha nature required one to grab their junior brother as meat to treat guests? The devil ape followed them up the mountain. When they came to the peak, Qin Mu looked down and saw that the place was similar to the golden peak of Great Thunderclap Monastery. However, there were a lot more stone statues which were probably placed to defend the area from the darkness. There were numerous Buddha pagodas on the peak and many monks cultivating. Most of them had beast heads, and they were all draped in a yellow xianxia. Their expressions were all solemn and respectful. Those monks were most likely the great demons that had achieved Tao in great ruins. Since they were able to cultivate that far, their positions had to be extraordinary. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. The cultivations of the great demons were all extremely strong, and the demon air around their bodies was also incomparably dense. It frightened him somewhat, as some people were probably strong practitioners of the cult master level. There was even blood light coming out from the demon air, which meant that those people had killed a lot in the past. I can't endure it anymore. Abstaining from eating meat and praying to Buddha every day, what's the F***king point? When will this end? Suddenly, a bird-headed monk jumped up and tore apart his yellow xianxia. When he swayed his head, golden feathers grew from his neck at a crazy speed. His body expanded, and more bird heads came popping out from the feathers, reaching a total of 9. When he spread his wings, they had an area of several hectares. I did whatever I liked in great ruins and ate countless humans and beasts before. I've been long plagued by sins, so why the F***ck do I have to abstain from eating meat and pray to Buddha? The 9-headed bird who looked like a peacock flapped his wings to rise. Those sins can't be washed off, so let me eat to my heart's content. The other monks rose into the sky right after, and Qin Mu saw that a few of them were actually human. They worked together to suppress the 9-headed peacock while saying, "Senior brother Ming, you are being controlled by your heart devil again. Quickly wake up. Don't let your cultivation of 1,000 years be destroyed by single false step." The monks worked together until they finally suppressed that 9-headed peacock. However, it was still arrogant and obstinate, crying out about wanting to cause a massacre. Little Rulai walked forward and suddenly pulled open his monk robes. He took out a knife and sliced a piece of meat from the pit of his stomach and threw it to the 9-headed peacock. "You want to eat meat? Eat then." The 9-headed peacock emanated a fierce aura and opened its mouth to catch little Rulai's flesh, swallowing it down. The other 8 heads then started shouting, "Rulai, you need to satisfy the desire of all of us. How can one piece of meat be enough? The other 8 mouths still haven't gotten to eat and are hungry." Little Rulai then sliced off another 8 pieces of flesh and threw them over. Each of the 8 heads grabbed a piece and swallowed them down. The devil ape revealed a look of delight and said in a low voice, "Little meat, guessed. Little Rulai gave him a stare, and the devil ape scratched his head. Even though the 9-headed peacock had eaten the 9 pieces of meat, it couldn't digest them and started coughing. After a moment, it opened its mouth to cough up a small peacock. Then it coughed up another one. The 9-headed peacock coughed 9 times in a row, and 9 peacocks left his stomach. They started running everywhere and stumbling around. Suddenly, they started merging with one another, transforming into a 9-headed peacock. When it sat down, the feathers on its butt spread open like a colorful fan. The 9-headed peacock looked at the small peacock on the ground, and its heart couldn't help trembling violently. Its devil nature instantly faded away, and it transformed back into a bird-headed monk. When he sat down in a lotus position, Buddha rays shone from his face as he smiled. Only today did I learn that all lives are like me. Senior brother Rulai, thank you. Excellent. Little Rulai closed his monk robe and said, Senior brother Ming, sitting on the mountain has no benefits to cultivation, so bring your son down the mountain and enter the world to cultivate. The 9-headed peacock stood up and brought the little peacock down the mountain. Qin Mu saw this pair of father and son leave and shook his head with a puzzled expression. Little Rulai had sliced his flesh to feed the 9-headed peacock, so why would it cough up a small 9-headed peacock? Why was it its son? Was it the technique of creation? Or was it some other spell divine art? Su Xianxia and Jing Yan were also at a loss. Su Xianxia then asked in a low voice, The technique of Little Thunderclap Monastery is different from Great Thunderclap Monastery. They have most likely absorbed some strange techniques in Great Ruins. Qin Mu nodded. There were no such strange spells in Great Thunderclap Monastery. On top of that, the monks of Little Thunderclap Monastery were mostly strange beasts who'd gained intelligence, so they naturally had extraordinary abilities. Some of the strong, strange beasts even had fortuitous encounters and cultivated some strange techniques of Great Ruins. After they joined Little Thunderclap Monastery with their strange techniques, they made Little Thunderclap Monastery's technique strange and gave it even more variation than there was in Great Thunderclap Monastery. The 3 of you please take a seat and look at us enlightening the devil god and achieving Buddhahood through our efforts and insight. On the golden peak, Little Rulai invited the 3 of them to take a seat. The yellow-robed monks sat down in their seats while Little Rulai took out a golden alms bowl. He swayed it gently, and the golden alms bowl grew larger. In the center of it was a sacrificial altar with the trapped primordial spirit of a devil god. It was currently struggling and shouting, rattling the chains of Buddha rays. The devil god on the altar was blood red, as though he was a sea of blood with countless damned souls lingering around him. The yellow-robed monks began to chant the scriptures loudly, and Buddha voice reverberated as they prepared to enlighten the devil god. Even you blood-drinking beasts dare to think of purifying me? That devil god was none other than shaman god Kuei, and he was not injured by the Buddha voice at all. He continued struggling to break free of the chains while smiling. When I slaughter my way out, all of you will become my food. Qin Mu's expression changed slightly and rose to warn the monks in a hurry. Rulai, this devil god is from the ghost race, so his soul is incomparably strong. He's the strongest evil god, so you guys have no way of enlightening him. He's borrowing your hands to purify the soul bugs in his body to break free of the seal left behind by Golden Palace's Grandmaster. The monks were all at a loss and looked at Little Rulai, who had also stopped chanting. On the sacrificial altar, Shaman God Kuei turned his head around to look at Qin Mu fiercely. So it's Cult Master Qin. My useless disciple tried to worship you a few times, but he couldn't do it. You're meddling again. But this time you are truly overestimating yourself. The expression of Little Rulai and the rest of the monks changed drastically, and they got up in a hurry. Shaman God Kuei, who was inside that altar, opened his mouth and spat out squeaking soul bugs. When they met the Buddha light, they dissolved into wisps of green smoke. Once they were gone, Shaman God Kuei's fierce aura instantly overflowed. Terrifying awe spread out, and the vegetation on the mountain instantly withered. All living things lost their life, and numerous demon monks that had lower cultivation collapsed on their backs, dying unnatural deaths. Little Rulai immediately pulled back the golden alms bowl and covered the sacrificial altar, trying to trap shaman god Kuei. Junior brother Po-ing, suppress this devil god under heavenly seal pagoda. A yellow-robed monk came forward and was about to take away the golden alms bowl when shaman god Kuei's laugh suddenly rang out. Your name is Po-ing? Take my worship. The yellow-robed monk collapsed on his back, his soul scattered. For a moment, no one dared to go forward. He. I can sense my life and death book nearby. You guys must have found and hidden it, right? Heaven is truly assisting me. Shaman god Kuei laughed loudly, and a Buddha pagoda suddenly trembled and shattered. A book flew out from it, going straight for the golden alms bowl. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 479, Life and Death Book. The expression of little Rulai and the rest of the demon monks changed drastically. They stretched out their hands to grab the book. It was an item that a monk on the mountain had found by chance. Because they didn't know what kind of treasure it was and how to use it, they had given it to the sect. Little Rulai and the rest also didn't know how to use it, just that it possessed extremely great power. Countless souls lingered around the book, so they had suppressed the book in the pagoda. Never did they expect that it was shaman god Kuei's item and had a name of Life and Death Book. When a monk's hand touched the Life and Death Book, it immediately started to rot. In an instant, it turned into white bones. While that monk hurriedly pulled back his hand, the other monks realized the situation. Each of them executed divine arts to intercept the book, but no one actually managed to hold it back. The book broke through the layers of divine arts on its way to the golden alms bowl. Little Rulai lifted up the golden alms bowl while clutching a madra in his other hand. With it, his 5 fingers were instantly like mountains formed by bolts of lightning which covered the golden alms bowl. Little Rulai planned to first kill shaman god Kuei. Yet at that moment, Life and Death Book flew over and little Rulai's palm began to age rapidly. Astonished, he threw the golden alms bowl away, and the Life and Death Book chased after it. Brother Su. Qin Mu took a step and caught up to the golden alms bowl at an extremely fast speed. In midair, he tapped with his fingers and runes instantly flew out. They were formed by the vital qi and shone brightly in the air while flickering indefinitely. At the same time, Su Xianxia also rushed over, and his speed was no slower than that of Qin Mu. His hands moved quickly, and there was vital qi bursting and transforming into runes from his fingers as well. However, his were god writings. Even though they were the same word, their method of writing was different. Qin Mu took another step and pointed forward with the other hand. He tapped every 4 steps, and after the 4th tap, the teleportation runes strung together to form a teleportation divine art, sealing the golden alms bowl within them. The Life and Death Book whizzed near the golden alms bowls and was swept up by the teleportation divine art which sent it 20 miles away. On the other side, Su Xianxia flipped his palm up, and hundreds of god writings covered the golden alms bowls. All the different writings spelled a single word. Seal. That word was completely different from the words of the human race. It brought a strange power with it. After all, Su Xianxia was the descendant of Jade Sovereign. That man was a god, so he naturally had marvelous techniques that the lower bound couldn't get. Su Xianxia covered the golden alms bowl with nearly 100 seals, cutting off the connection between shaman god Kuei and the Life and Death Book. Qin Mu took out the brush from his taotai sack and pulled out a scroll, one side of which he threw to Su Xianxia. The young man caught it, but it was a piece of white paper. Qin Mu raised his brush, and its tip moved rapidly. He quickly painted wind and lightning, then threw the golden alms bowl inside. It then floated around in the wind and lightning. Next, Qin Mu handed the brush and ink to Su Xianxia, who raised it to write on the painting. He wrote the seal word in God writing around the wind and lightning. Qin Mu then took out his own seal from taotai sack and stamped it at the corner of the painting. Su Xianxia took out his personal seal too and stamped at the side. Qin Mu swept up the scroll, and the two of them let out a sigh of relief. In the distance, the devil ape had flown over and snatched the treasure book called Life and Death Book back. On the golden peak, little Rulai and the other monks looked at each other in dismay. Qin Mu and Su Xianxia's cultivation were not considered high, but their cooperation was flawless. One of them teleported life and death book away while the other sealed the golden alms bowl to cut off the connection. Qin Mu then raised his brush to paint while Su Xianxia helped to spread out the scroll. The latter then sealed it, and both of them stamped their seals on it. This kind of cooperation was as though they had practiced those actions thousands of times. It was as smooth as flowing water. The one with the surname Qin, do you dare to report your real name? Shaman God Kuei asked from the painting. Qin Mu ignored him and spoke to little Rulai. Shaman God Kuei's abilities are unpredictable. As long as he knows the name, he can worship your soul away. Rulai didn't know his power, so you suffered a loss. I had planned to get rid of this old devil by going to Qin Mountain, and he even almost escaped from Rulai's suppression. We should quickly get rid of him to prevent future troubles. Getting rid of him is also huge merit. Little Rulai hesitated. Shaman God Kuei is plagued with countless damned souls. If I could enlighten them, it would definitely be supreme merit. If I just kill him, I'm afraid. Qin Mu frowned at him. Now I know that there is a difference between big and little. Little Rulai raised his eyebrows. Cult Master Qin, please return me the golden alms bowl. Old monk shall lead all the monks on the mountain to enlighten him. I don't believe he will remain that stubborn. Qin Mu handed the scroll over to him. Su Xianxia coughed, but Qin Mu shook his head. They didn't have the ability to barge out of Little Thunderclap Monastery with the scroll. Trying to leave by force would only bring contempt upon them. Su Xianxia could only drop it and say, Senior Brother Zhang Kong, pass me that life and death book and let me take a look. The devil ape gave him the book, and Su Xianxia was slightly stunned. Life and death book wasn't a book, but an incomparably thin piece of paper. It was strange and glossy like metal. It was extremely bright, reflecting light. Yet, what was even weirder was that life and death book didn't have any words or even pictures. Su Xianxia's gaze landed on that blankness, and he could actually see people in front through the mirror-like paper. What is this weird book? Su Xianxia's heart suddenly trembled. Behind life and death book was Jing Yan, and above her figure there was actually a line of words. They said Jing Yan. Su Xianxia's hair stood on ends, and he immediately turned toward Qin Mu. Jing Yan disappeared, replaced by Qin Mu's figure, and the name that showed up wasn't Qin Mu, but Qin Fengqing. Cult Master Qin. Su Xianxia's face became solemn. He passed the life and death book to Qin Mu, who soon also discovered its use. His heart trembled violently. His name wasn't the only one that life and death book could reveal. As long as one of the demon monks on the mountain had a name, it would be shown on the paper. Who can defend against such an item? Qin Mu's blood ran cold. The treasure showed a person's birth name. The true name. Little Thunderclap Monastery's monks were mostly demons, so they usually didn't have any names before their intelligence was awakened. But once it happened, they became monks and had to have a name. Their name in religion then resulted in their real name. What life and death book showed then was their name in religion. For example, when Qin Mu was young, his good friend the devil ape had no name and was only called the devil ape. Qin Mu and Hu Linger often called him Big Fella. After he joined Little Thunderclap Monastery, only then did he gain his name in religion, Zhang Kong. In the life and death book, the devil ape's name was Zhang Kong. Qin Mu pointed the book at Little Rulai, and he also had his name in religion. It was Yuan Ding. With this treasure, won't Shaman God Kuei be able to kill whoever he wants to kill? Not to say Shaman God Kuei. Even that scoundrel Pan Gong Tso would become invincible. Qin Mu's heart shivered, and he shone the life and death book on the dragon Qilin. On the paper, 2 words above him, Long Pai. Fatty Dragon actually has a name? Qin Mu was astonished. The dragon Qilin had been picked up by Patriarch in great ruins after he had starved for many days. Because Patriarch gave him something to eat, he clung to Patriarch. Yet the dragon Qilin actually had a name as well. Qin Mu didn't know if it was Patriarch or his mother who had given it to him. This item has to be destroyed. Qin Mu tried to tear it apart without a word, but he couldn't do it. Su Xianxia went up and the 2 of them tugged onto the life and death book, but they still couldn't tear it apart. What are you 2 doing? A yellow-eyebrowed monk immediately shouted out. Qin Mu took out his sword pellet and pulled Carefree Sword out. Yet even Carefree Sword couldn't harm the treasure book. A string of concentrated runes appeared above the book and blocked the blade. Those runes were extremely strange, and Qin Mu barely took a short glance before they disappeared. They looked like Yudu's writing. Could this treasure be from Yudu? His scalp crawled. Carefree Sword was the treasure of his father, Qin Hanjin. How powerful was he? Even Saturn's sovereign was severely injured by him, but his sword actually couldn't harm Life and Death book. This meant that it was at the least a treasure of gods and devils that was on the same level as Carefree Sword. It might even be higher. In that case, it also said that the cultivation of shaman god Kuei was on par with that of Qin Hanjin or even surpassed it. His abilities were above even Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, this new god. The yellow-eyebrowed monk went forward and stretched his hand to grab the Life and Death book. Cult Master Qin, this treasure is the treasure of our little Thunderclap Monastery, so please return it to us. Qin Mu swept up the Life and Death book and stuffed it into his Taotai sack, secretly throwing it into the true dragon's nest. He smiled and said, "Little Rulai, when you try to enlighten shaman god Kuei, aren't you afraid that he will call for this Life and Death book again? It's best if you leave it with me for now." Little Rulai took a deep look at him and called the yellow-eyebrowed monk back. "Let Cult Master Qin keep it for a few days. Once we enlighten this devil god, we will achieve supreme merit and transcend this realm. There won't be any birth, growing old, or dying. We will become Buddhas. An important matter is at hand, so fellow junior brothers, follow me to enlighten senior brother." "Excellent!" all of the monks said in unison. Little Rulai and the monks fetched all kinds of magic artifacts and hung them up. They first fixed Qin Mu's painting in place before laying down layers of formations to block shaman god Kuei's senses. They then started to chant to enlighten him. Su Shenghua's gaze flickered, and he said in a low voice, "Cult Master Qin, should we leave?" Qin Mu shook his head. "I can't leave. If shaman god Kuei is not enlightened, I won't be at ease." The devil ape nodded. "Dead ease." Qin Mu smiled. "Big fella is right. However, little Rulai is insistent on enlightening him, but from what I see, it's going to be very difficult." Su Shanghua rose and said to Jing Yan, "Cult Master worries for the world, but we are floating clouds. There's no need for us to remain here." Jing Yan nodded, and the two of them walked down the mountain. "I cultivated the 18th sword form while you merged 6 directions and 7 stars divine treasure into one. Don't you want to learn my sword move? I want to learn how you merged 7 stars and 6 directions into one," Qin Mu said leisurely. Su Shanghua stopped and turned his head back with a smile. "I thought Cult Master won't mention this since you are arrogant and conceited, not caring about fame and fortune. If you want to learn, I'll teach you." Qin Mu smiled at him. "Don't you want to learn my 18th sword form?" "I don't," Su Shenghua said bluntly. "My sword skills aren't that high level, and my main offense isn't based on them." Qin Mu's face instantly turned black. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 480. It's a Small World. Once I learned Cult Master's Primordial Spirit Guide, I was greatly influenced. Primordial Spirit Guide is a marvelous technique that cannot be measured. It opens up numerous possibilities for the future. Su Shanghua, Qin Mu, the Devil Ape, and the rest sat in a temple on the Golden Peak and talked about Primordial Spirit Guide which Qin Mu and Ling Yuxiu had founded. Even this visitor from high heavens couldn't help smiling in exultation at it. He was in high spirits and clapped his hands in admiration. Primordial Spirit Guide pushed what can be done in 7 stars realm forward to 6 directions realm. In regards to how to cultivate and unleash the power of the primordial spirit in 6 direction realm, it's still a blank piece of paper. There are many things that could be done inside, for example, creating all kinds of primordial spirit divine arts. Every kind of divine art created is a huge advancement in the paths, skills, and divine arts. This would then affect all of the realms beyond, like celestial being, life and death, and divine bridge. This is what I admire the most in Cult Master. After saying that, even he couldn't help looking over with respect. Cult Master and Princess Xiu's Primordial Spirit Guide could make them teachers of the whole world. He definitely lives up to his reputation as human emperor. I revere you, yet at the same time am frightened. You and I are overlord bodies, but you already achieved something like that. So what must I do to not fall behind you? Su Xianxia smiled and said leisurely, your primordial spirit guide has created countless possibilities for the paths, skills, and divine arts, so I chose the biggest challenge, and it was to merge 7 stars realms and 6 directions realm. Merging 2 realms together involves too many things. It's equivalent to destroying a realm. How did you do it? Qin Mu asked solemnly. There are a total of 7 treasures. Spirit embryo, 5 elements, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, life and death, and divine bridge. Among them, spirit embryo awakens the spirituality, allowing spirit embryo to take shape as the core for opening up the heaven and earth. When the spirit embryo is set on the spirit platform as the core, 5 elements are born. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, these 5 stars orbit around the spirit platform. Then, when it gives rise to land, there will be north, south, east, west, up and down, these 6 directions. Once they come into existence, sun and moon is born, which increases the number of stars to 7. With 7 stars and the spirit embryo complete, they become a celestial being. The primordial spirit of a celestial being is strong enough to connect life and death. Death is Yudu under the primordial spirit's feet, hidden under the land of the spirit platform. When Yudu is formed, that's life and death. Life is then the divine bridge which stretches above the primordial spirit and leads to the celestial palaces. After entering them, a person will leave the control of Yudu and no longer have a limited lifespan. While Su Xianxia explained the marvel of the 7 great realms, Qin Mu nodded repeatedly. His understanding of the realms that Su Xianxia had explained was pretty similar. However, there was a slight difference on 7 stars realm. The sun and moon in Qin Mu's divine treasure were long formed, before 7 stars realm. This point had seemed different from ordinary cultivation, but Qin Mu treated it as a unique point of the overlord body and didn't put it to heart. In that case, how did you merge 6 directions and 7 stars into one? He asked sincerely. Su Xianxia smiled and said, reverse deduction. Qin Mu's body trembled and he let out a shaky breath. Smart. I imagine myself standing at the southern heavenly gates of the celestial palaces, overlooking the 7 great realms. From that height, the 7 great realms were ultimately just one, Su Xianxia said leisurely. 7 great divine treasures is actually only one divine treasure separated into 7. If a person was strong enough, they could turn 7 divine treasures into one, opening all just by opening one and enter the celestial palaces directly. However, no one can possess that terrifying power when they are born. But the primordial spirit guide that cult master and Princess Xiao founded makes it possible for 7 stars and 6 directions to become one divine treasure. It's easy to say but hard to execute. Between different divine treasures lies a realm and a barrier separating them. Merging the divine treasures means to merge the realms and break the barrier. How did you manage to break the barrier between the 2 divine treasures and make them into one? Qin Mu said. To merge the 2 great divine treasures into one and break the barrier in advance, one has to mainly rely on their primordial spirit to forcefully merge the 2 great divine treasures into one. For this, I founded 7 stars 6 directions primordial spirit technique on the foundation of Cult Master's primordial spirit guide. He executed his primordial spirit technique, and a violent aura instantly rushed into the sky. His vital qi formed visions. A lotus was born under Su Xianxia's feet, and his spirit embryo appeared inside it. The lotus was the spirit platform. It swirled and bloomed, transforming into a lotus land in an instant. At the same time, his 5 elements flew out, and the 5 stars orbited around the lotus land. 5 gods stood on the 5 stars, and they all had different kinds of faces. The qi of yin and yang then transformed into sun and moon to soar into the sky. When they joined the 5 elements, there were 7 stars. The spirit embryo became larger and larger while standing upright on the lotus land. Multicolored sunlight shone from the lotus and connected 5 elements with 7 stars. Qin Mu instantly felt his primordial spirit standing upright between the heaven and earth. With it as the hub, vital qi moved along bizarre trajectories, and the barrier between the divine treasures could no longer be seen. What xianxia had opened was the connection between heaven and earth. 7 stars and 6 directions were 2 separate great divine treasures, but 7 stars 6 directions primordial spirit technique connected the heaven and earth and obliterated the barrier between the heaven and earth completely. Qin Mu rose, and his vital qi raged as he shouted, "Brother Su, let me see to which step your cultivation has risen after merging the 2 great realms." He executed Thunderclap 8 strikes as Spring Thunder on the lonely East Sea and punched. Furious sea waves surged while Spring Thunder exploded and rang throughout the mountain range. Su Xianxia raised his hand to receive his move, and both of their bodies shook. Qin Mu took a step back with a look of astonishment. The density of Su Xianxia's vital qi had been a line lower than his, but after merging the 2 great realms, he was actually a line higher than him. The merger of the 2 great realms was indeed extraordinary. Su Xianxia dispersed the vision and explained the technique he had founded. Qin Mu's expression changed. Su Xianxia's 7 stars 6 directions primordial spirit technique mainly relied on the spirit embryo. Its fusion with the soul would transform it into the primordial spirit. The primordial spirit would then become the center of the 4 great divine treasures and connect the hub of 7 stars and 6 directions, mobilizing all of the energy in the 4 great divine treasures. It would refine the barrier between the heaven and earth, merging the 2 realms into one. In that case, all of the barriers between the divine treasures can be broken. When it comes to divine bridge divine treasure, the 7 great divine treasures would become one. Qin Mu was in a daze. His primordial spirit guide was a start, and Su Xianxia's 7 stars 6 directions primordial spirit technique was taking 2 to 3 steps from that point. What lay before them were countless possibilities, for 7 stars and 6 directions were the only ones who could merge. Even the barrier between spirit embryo and 5 elements could be removed. Celestial being, life and death, divine bridge, the barriers of these realms could also all be removed. If one cultivated to divine bridge realm and fused celestial being realm to create access to life and death, the 7 great divine treasures would all become one. There would no longer be any difference in realm. If that was the case, it would definitely lead to a huge reform. The abilities of all the divine arts practitioners in the world would rise by a lot. And the change brought by the rise of the divine arts practitioners' abilities would also be extraordinary. Wanting to break all of the barriers, that would probably take dozens or even a couple hundred years of hard work. However, now we're seeing the dawn. Brother Su, you have done a remarkable deed, Qin Mu muttered. If it wasn't for Cult Master's primordial spirit guide, I wouldn't have been able to take this step. Cult Master, it was you and Princess Xiao who did a remarkable deed, Su Xianxia said humbly. Qin Mu laughed loudly. Su Xianxia had no idea that the reason he was able to comprehend primordial spirit guide was mainly because of the encounter on the pleasure boat. When the 2 of them had met for the first time, they had clashed to test the other. Only with his mind agitated from the encounter was Qin Mu able to cultivate the primordial spirit with Ling Yuxiu. Based on that, Su Xianxia had some indirect credit in primordial spirit guide founding. Suddenly, rumblings of thunder came from their side as the devil ape's body expanded. He couldn't help revealing his true form, changing into a pitch-black violent ape that was as big as a small mountain. After Su Xianxia explained 7 stars 6 directions primordial spirit technique, the devil ape had executed his primordial spirit and operated it according to the technique. Everyone jumped in shock and moved back, watching as the primordial spirit of the devil ape rumbled. Su Xianxia's technique was actually operated smoothly by him, and he was planning to merge 6 directions and 7 stars. Su Xianxia's heart trembled, and he took a look at Qin Mu. Cult Master, isn't the aptitude of senior brother Zhang Kong a little too good? Qin Mu suppressed the astonishment in his heart and raised his head to look at the abnormally huge body of the devil ape. His thoughts are without any impurities. In the past, he had also learned Thunderclap 8 strikes of Great Thunderclap Monastery much faster than me. Because his thoughts are focused, his advancement in cultivation is extremely fast and fierce. Could he be overlord body as well? Su Xianxia asked suspiciously. The physique of the devil ape was naturally strong, and his cultivation was dense. When executing the primordial spirit, he was brave and fierce as well as incomparably overbearing. He had received old Rulai's teachings, who taught him Rulai's Mahayana scriptures. He then followed little Rulai to cultivate. He had received the teachings from the two supreme masters of Buddhism, so the foundation of his cultivation was very deep. However, even though his thoughts were pure, he was much inferior in breaking new ground compared to Qin Mu and Su Xianxia. Qin Mu's thoughts were complicated, but he could usually comprehend new things by analogy and found new cultivation methods. Su Xianxia's thoughts were much more conforming, but what he learned was more heterogeneous. His unyielding spirit was also forced out by Qin Mu, so he was able to found his primordial spirit technique on Qin Mu's foundation. As for the devil ape, he didn't have this kind of comprehension, but he learned other people's techniques extremely fast. The three of them cultivated in three different kinds of way. The devil ape only learned and didn't seek to understand. As long as he could cultivate, he would immediately cultivate. Su Xianxia was fusion, seeking to understand and gain more understanding. Qin Mu, on the other hand, was a pathmaker. When there was no path ahead, he would open up one. Qin Mu also has his weak points. After opening a path, he would usually go and do other things instead of continuing on that path. Because of that, the one who founded 7 Stars 6 Directions primordial spirit technique was Su Xianxia and not him. The techniques and divine arts that Qin Mu and Su Xianxia founded, the devil ape was, however, the fastest to learn. Before Qin Mu could even start to cultivate the primordial spirit technique, Zhang Kong was already starting to break the barrier of the realms. Qin Mu immediately abandoned other thoughts and focused on cultivating the primordial spirit technique, striving to break the barrier between 6 directions and 7 stars realm. 2 days later, he finally broke through, and only then did he open his eyes. He saw Su Xianxia and the devil ape fighting among the mountains with abnormal fierceness. Beside them, there were demon monks of all sizes standing in a circle and cheering. Qin Mu was about to rush over when he heard a familiar voice coming from the bottom of the mountain. "Little Thunderclap Monastery, what big guts you've got! How dare you steal the primordial spirit of my master? Listen up, bald donkeys on the mountain. Hand the primordial spirit of my master over or I will wipe out your whole sect." Qin Mu looked down and saw Pangong Tso walking up the mountain with his legs bent backward. His half-crooked and half-squatting movement was extremely eye-catching when he walked. This brat, didn't I chop off just one of his legs? Why is his other leg changed as well? Qin Mu was overjoyed to see him and sent his sword flying without any warning. It whizzed past dozens of miles toward its target. Pangong Tso had just attached his buck's legs, so he couldn't react in time. When he saw the sword light and wanted to avoid, it was already too late. After sprinting 2 steps, he saw that the sword light had already come to his front from the back. He hurriedly looked back and saw his 2 buck's legs sprinting frantically behind him. "You mother****cur. Pangong Tso's body fell to the ground and became a huge chunk shorter. He raised his head to shout angrily, "Qin brat, you and I cannot exist together. It's a small world." Qin Mu called his sword back where he stood on the golden peak with his arms on his waist. He laughed loudly and said, "Grandmaster is really courteous, even bringing 2 buck legs to treat me. How can little brother bear to reject you? I can only accept it." At that moment, a youth carrying a chest walked over from the mountain gate and raised his head to look at Qin Mu at the golden peak. There was a smile on his pure face. "Great divine physician Qin, it really is a small world. We meet again."